Hi, Guy. Tonight we travel back to a time of silk and steel, where the fate of an empire hangs by a single golden thread. Imagine the air, thick with the scent of cinnamon and sun-baked dust. The low murmur of 1,000 conversations fills a sprawling market. But beneath it, there's a hum of fear, a vibration of change that prickles the skin. An empire is teetering on the brink. The last great Parthian king, Artabanus IV, faces a devastating rebellion, and the impending collapse threatens to plunge the known world into chaos. For a pessimistic but hard-working tailor named Azar, whose entire life is stitched to the whims of the court, this isn't just news. It's a threat that forces him to act. Let's be honest. Dropped into the middle of this kind of political turmoil, with its back-alley betrayals and complete lack of a 24-hour news cycle, you probably wouldn't survive this. If you enjoy these little trips back in time, a gentle tap on that like button and a subscribe would be wonderful. I'd love to see where and when you're listening from in the comments below. Now, get comfortable and let the sounds of the ancient world fade in. You're in a marketplace at the heart of an empire, and the whispers are getting louder. Your needle, a tiny sliver of polished bone, dips and rises through a river of peacock blue silk. Dip, pull, dip, pull. The rhythm is a familiar comfort, a tiny anchor in a city that feels increasingly adrift. You are Azar, a tailor, and your fingers know the language of silk better than your tongue knows courtly pleasantries. This particular robe, destined for some minor functionary in the royal court, is a riot of gold thread, tracing the flight of mythical simurgs across the shoulders. It's a garment for a man who wants to look important, and you suppose that's your real job, not just sewing robes, but stitching illusions of power. A pessimistic thought, perhaps, but pessimism is a sturdy cloak in uncertain times. And these times are nothing if not uncertain. The marketplace of Ctesiphon churns around your small, shaded stall. It's a symphony of chaos, the rhythmic clang of a coppersmith's hammer, the high-pitched haggling over the price of saffron, the braying of a stubborn donkey that has decided this, right here, is the perfect spot for a nap. But lately, a new sound has woven itself into the city's fabric: whispers. They slither from stall to stall, passed between cupped hands and over sacks of grain. Whispers of a challenger from the south, a provincial governor named Ardashir. Whispers of legions switching their allegiance. Whispers of Artabanus the king, the fourth of his name, losing his grip. You try to ignore it, focusing on the glint of gold thread, but it's like trying to ignore a sandstorm. It gets in your eyes, in your throat, in your work. It's the ancient world's version of doom scrolling, and it's just as draining. You sigh, holding the robe up to the light. The shade of gold is so loud it could probably startle a camel. Another masterpiece for a man who might be serving a new, less flamboyant king next month, or find he has no head left to wear it on. You shake your own head, trying to dislodge the thought. Worry doesn't pay for the rent on this stall, or for the lamb stew simmering over your mother's fire. Only the steady dip and pull of the needle does that. A shadow falls across your work, blocking the afternoon sun. It's a large shadow, smelling of salt in distant lands. You don't even need to look up. Farnesses, you say, your voice flat. You don't stop sewing. Your ship docks early. Quote, "The winds were favorable," a rough voice answers, but there's a tremor in it that has nothing to do with a long voyage. You finally look up at your cousin. Farnesses is built like the barges he navigates down the Persian Gulf. Broad, sturdy, and usually unflappable. But today he looks frayed. His skin is tanned to the color of old leather, but there's a pallor underneath it. His beard, usually a wild, proud thicket, seems to droop with exhaustion, and his eyes, the color of the Gulf on a stormy day, are wide with a fear he's failing to conceal. You set the robe aside, the simers crumpling into a shimmering blue pile. Favorable winds don't make a sailor look like he's seen a sea serpent. Quote, Farnesses glances around nervously, his gaze darting from the spice merchant to the guards lounging by the city gate. He leans in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial rasp. "It's not right out there, Azar." "Not right at all." He pulls a stool closer, his large frame seeming to shrink. "We put in at Carax for supplies." The port was tense. The harbor master, a man I've known for 10 years, wouldn't look me in the eye. Kept talking about new tariffs, new masters. You pour him a cup of water from the clay jug you keep under your bench. His hand trembles as he takes it. "New masters?" You repeat, keeping your own voice low. The Sassanids. He whispers the name as if it might burn his tongue. Ardashir. His name is on every tongue, from the docks to the desert trade routes. They say his armies swell with every passing day. They say Artabatus sent a legion to crush him, and the legion, well, they just joined him instead. The old king's ship is taking on water Azar, and the rats are already looking for a new dock. Quote, you listen, a cold knot tightening in your stomach. These are the same whispers you've heard here, but hearing them from Pharnaces, a man who has seen the world beyond the city walls, gives them a terrifying weight. He is your mother's sister's son, your only cousin. Since his parents passed, he has always looked to you as the anchor, the sensible one, the one who could make sense of the world's ledger. But right now, the numbers refuse to add up. It's just talk, Pharnaces, you say, more to convince yourself than him. The court is still the court. The king is still the king. He shakes his head, gulping the water. Is he? We saw Parthian ships, royal ships, being repainted in the harbor, their standards taken down, quietly, in the dead of night, but they were doing it. Getting ready. A merchant from Persia told me Artabanus will be defeated before the next full moon. Not might be, will be. The certainty in his voice chills you more than any rumor. You look down at your hands, at the calluses on your fingertips from years of pulling thread. Your whole life, your family's entire security, is built on the stability of the court you serve. You stitch the robes for the powerful, and in return you earn enough silver to live. If that power crumbles, if the king falls, what happens to the king's tailor? A new dynasty won't want robes made by the old one's artisan. They'll want their own people, their own styles. You'd be cast aside, a relic of a fallen age. A dark, grimly funny thought crosses your mind. Well, at least if the world ends, I won't have to finish this sleeve. You look from your cousin's terrified face to the opulent, ridiculous robe lying in your lap. The golden birds seem to mock you, symbols of a power that is already a ghost. Pharnaces is right. This isn't just talk. This is the tide turning, and you are standing on the shore, watching it come in. You tell Pharnaces to go to your mother's house, to eat, to rest. You watch his broad shoulders slump as he disappears into the crowd, a ship lost in a sea of people. He is looking for an anchor, and he has chosen you. The thought is terrifying. An anchor can hold a ship fast, but it can also be dragged to the bottom. You sit for a long time, the peacock blue silk a cold weight in your lap. The sun begins its slow descent, painting the dust motes dancing in the air in hues of orange and rose. The market's roar softens to a hum. It is the time of day when you normally begin to pack your threads, but you feel rooted to your stool, paralyzed by the chilling certainty Pharnaces has left behind. The rats are leaving the ship. And you? You are the one who mends the captain's fine clothes. Just as you resolve to finally pack up, another shadow falls over you. This one is different from your cousin's. It is thin, precise, and carries no scent of the sea. You look up to see a man cloaked in plain, undyed wool, his face obscured by a deep hood. His posture, however, is anything but plain. He stands with the ramrod stillness of a court guard, his hands clasped behind his back. A courtier trying to look like a commoner, it's the worst disguise in the world. Tailor Azar? His voice is a dry rasp, the voice of a man used to giving orders in quiet, important rooms. You nod, your throat suddenly tight. I am. He doesn't waste time on pleasantries. He steps closer, his gaze sweeping your stall, noting the quality of the silk, the fineness of your stitches. A flicker of approval, or perhaps just assessment, crosses what little you can see of his face. Your work is known for its discretion and its quality. Both are required now. From beneath his cloak, he produces a small, heavy purse that clinks with the promise of silver, perhaps even gold. He places it on your workbench. It lands with a soft, final thud. Next to it, he places a scroll, sealed with the plain wax of a minor bureaucratic office. Yet it feels somehow heavier than the purse. You are to fashion a garment, he says, his voice barely above a whisper. The design is in the scroll, but the material, it is not one you keep in stock. He pauses. You will need a specific type of treated canvas. It must be dyed the precise shade of lapis lazuli, the color of the king's ceremonial guard. It must be strong enough to turn a blade, yet supple enough to pass for heavy silk in torchlight. Quote, Your mind races. Canvas that can turn a blade? A tailor doesn't work with such things. That is the work of an armorer, or... There is only one person in this city with the skill to make such a fabric, the man continues, anticipating your question. A tent maker in the caravan market. Her name is Nargis. Procure what you need from her. Tell no one. Ask no questions. Finish the work within 3 days. A second purse, twice the size of this one, will be yours upon completion. Quote, he turns to leave, a ghost melting back into the twilight. Wait, you call out, your voice thin. Who is the robe for? Quote, the man stops, but does not turn around. It is for a man who values his life. I suggest you value yours and do as you are told. The shadow is gone. You are left with a bag of silver, a sealed scroll, and an order that feels like a death sentence. Nargis. You know the name. Everyone in the market does. She makes tents for the legions, for wealthy merchants who dare the Silk Road, for anyone who needs shelter that will not fail. Her reputation for quality is matched only by her reputation for a viciously sharp tongue and a deep-seated contempt for anything related to the royal court. This will not be a simple transaction. Clutching the purse, you leave your stall, pulling the canvas cover over your silks, you navigate the winding alleys, leaving the familiar scent of spices and perfumes behind. You head toward the caravan grounds, where the city frayed into a wilder, tougher edge. Here, the air smells of animals, of oiled leather, of damp wool, and acrid smoke from 100 cooking fires. This is the world of Nargis. Her stall isn't a stall at all. It's a sprawling workshop, open to the air but covered by one of her own creations. A massive awning of dark brown canvas that has seen 1,000 storms and betrayed none of them. Beneath it, the space is a forest of rolled textiles, standing on end like pillars of a forgotten temple. Bolts of heavy-duty canvas, waterproofed goat hair cloth, and thick, rugged leather are stacked everywhere. The tools of her trade are scattered on a workbench stout enough to hold an ox. Heavy shears, bronze awls, thick beeswax cakes for waterproofing thread, and mallets with worn, greasy handles. And in the center of it all is Nargis. She is on her knees, wrestling with a vast sheet of black canvas, her movements powerful and efficient. She isn't tall, but she is built with a solid, undeniable strength. Her arms, bare to the elbow, are corded with muscle. Her black hair is ruthlessly tied back, and her face, smudged with what looks like tar, is a mask of intense concentration. She hammers a grommet into place with 3 sharp, perfectly spaced blows of her mallet. Thwack, thwack, thwack. You clear your throat. Nargis? Quote, she doesn't look up. If you're here for a pleasure tent, you're in the wrong place. I make things that work. Thwack. Asterisk. Another grommet. I was told you are the best, you begin, trying to sound confident. She finally stops, setting the mallet down with a weary sigh. She rises to her feet in a single, fluid motion and turns her gaze on you. Her eyes are the color of dark, polished stone, and they take in your relatively fine clothes, your clean hands, your entire being with undisguised disdain. I am the best, she says, her voice a low growl, which means I am expensive and I am busy. What do you want? Quote, I need a material. You feel foolish. A silk tailor asking for canvas. A special kind of canvas. Treat it. It needs to be dyed. She crosses her arms, her stony eyes narrowing. I dye canvas 3 colors. Dust, dirt, and shadow. Good for not being seen by bandits. What's your need? Quote, you take a breath. The color of lapis lazuli. Nargis lets out a short, sharp laugh. It's not a pleasant sound. Lapis? The king's color? What would a silk stitcher like you want with my canvas dyed like a court peacock? Planning to make a tent for a general's pampered horse? Quote, it's for a client, you say, trying to keep your voice steady. A wealthy merchant who wants a durable traveling cloak. He is eccentric. Eccentric, she scoffs, picking up a wicked-looking awl and testing its point on her thumb. The rich are always eccentric when they're being stupid. A canvas cloak the color of the royal guard. That's not eccentric, that's a target. You'd be better off painting a bullseye on his back. Who is this merchant? Quote, my client's privacy is part of my service. Is it? She takes a step closer, and you can smell the oil and wax on her. It's a clean, practical smell, but intimidating. My survival is part of mine. The Sasanans are not fools. Anyone marching around in Parthian royal blue in the southern provinces these days is either a madman or a spy. I sell to neither. My tents are for people who want to live, not for those with a death wish. Quote, her words hit you like a physical blow. She sees the political landscape not with your pessimistic fear, but with a cold, hard clarity. She isn't worried about losing her business. She knows survivors will always need tents. New kings, old kings, it doesn't matter. A tent is a tent. A silk robe is a statement. And the statement is about to go out of fashion. The old king's ship is taking on water, she says, her voice dropping, echoing the very words Pharnaces used. And I don't sell life rafts to a crew of fools who drilled the holes themselves with their decadence and their greed. Go stitch your pretty birds onto another shroud, tailor. She has turned you down, dismissed you. The mission has failed before it's even begun. Panic, cold and sharp, lances through you. The cloaked man's words echo in your mind. I suggest you value your life. Desperation sharpens your wit. You look at the black canvas she was working on, at the perfect, sturdy grommets. You look at her strong, calloused hands. Pride. Her work is her pride. You're right, you say, your voice changing, taking on a new edge. It's a foolish errand. The color is impossible anyway, quote. Nargis freezes, the awl in her hand still. What did you say? Quote, the lapis color, you say, shrugging as if it's of no consequence. My client insists on it, but to dye heavy canvas that exact shade, to make it hold the color without it cracking or fading under the sun, to make it look like royal silk from 20 paces. It can't be done. The materials are too different. I told him it was impossible. I imagine I'll have to tell him the great Nargis agrees. Quote, you turn to leave, your heart hammering against your ribs. You have thrown down a gauntlet. You can only pray she picks it up. You hear her move behind you. Stop! You halt, but you do not turn. Nothing is impossible, she says, her voice low and dangerous. It is only a matter of skill and price. I can dye goat leather to look like a summer sky if the coin is right. Lapis on canvas is child's play. Quote, but to make it supple, you press, pushing your luck. Strong enough to turn a blade, yet soft enough to fool the eye. Quote, you hear her walk up right behind you. There is a Cimmerian treatment, involving mare's milk and bitumen boiled under a low flame for a day. It makes the canvas strong and pliable. The dye must be mixed with fish glue to bind it. She is talking more to herself than to you, solving the puzzle. It is difficult. It is tedious. It will cost you. How much? You ask. Finally turning to face her, she looks you up and down one last time, a flicker of something, not quite respect, but a grudging acknowledgement in her eyes. Everything in that purse you're clutching like a holy relic, she says, nodding towards your cloak. And another just like it for my silence. This is foolish work, tailor, and I will be paid for my part in your client's foolishness. Quote, it's extortion, but it's also a deal. You pull out the heavy purse and hand it to her. She hefts it, her expression unreadable, then tucks it away somewhere in the folds of her clothes. 3 days, she says. Come back in 3 days at this same hour. Do not come sooner. She turns her back on you, picking up her mallet. Now get out of my workshop. You smell of perfume and fear. It's bad for the canvas. Thwack. The sound of the mallet on the grommet follows you as you retreat back into the labyrinthine alleys of the market. The weight of the sealed scroll under your cloak, a terrifying promise of the work to come. You have the material. You have stepped onto the loom. And you feel the first threads of intrigue tightening around you, pulling you into the very heart of the storm. The 3 days that follow are a blur of measured cuts and careful stitches. You work in the dim light of your stall, the lapis blue canvas spread across your bench like a piece of captured sky. Nargis was true to her word. The material is a marvel of craft, a contradiction in textile form. It is impossibly heavy, yet it drapes with the grace of thick wool. The color is a deep, vibrant blue, so rich it seems to drink the light, and it holds a subtle sheen from the fish glue treatment that does, from a distance, mimic the luster of silk. But to your expert touch, it feels alien. The needle doesn't glide through it. It must be forced, each stitch an act of will. This is not a garment. It is a shield disguised as one. You unsealed the scroll with trembling fingers on the first night. The design was for a chiton, but not the flowing, pleated kind worn by courtiers. This was a warrior's cut, short, allowing for free movement, with reinforced seams at the shoulders and sides. The instructions were brutally precise, with measurements down to the width of a thumbnail and diagrams for stitching patterns that looked more like fortifications than embroidery. You were not stitching illusions of power anymore. You were stitching a piece of a very real, very dangerous plan. Your pessimism, once a comfortable cloak, now feels thin and useless against this cold reality. On the evening of the third day, as you stitch the final hem, the same cloaked man materializes from the twilight shadows of the market. He doesn't speak, merely watches you finish the last knot and snip the thread. You fold the garment, the strange canvas rustling like dry leaves. It is heavy, compact, a block of blue danger. He inspects your work, running a gloved finger along a seam. You see his head nod in the gloom. The king holds audience tonight, in the tent of gold. You will deliver this yourself. Come to the eastern gate of the palace grounds at the 3rd hour after sunset. Give your name. You will be expected. He places a small inscribed clay token in your hand. Show this. Do not be late. He vanishes as quickly as he appeared, leaving you with the chilling instructions and a token that feels hot to the touch. The Tent of Gold. The name itself is a boast. It is not just a tent, it is the heart of Parthian power, a mobile palace where Artabanus IV receives dignitaries and decides the fates of men. To be summoned there, even as a delivery person, is unheard of. A knot of ice forms in your stomach. You make your way to the palace grounds as the city settles into the deep velvet of night. The guards at the eastern gate are impassive giants in iron scale mail. They look at your clay token, then at you, their eyes lingering on the bundle in your arms. One of them leads you through manicured gardens where the scent of night-blooming jasmine wars with the metallic tang of authority. And then you see it. It rises from the center of a vast, torch-lit lawn, a structure of impossible grandeur. It is not merely decorated with gold, it seems to be woven from it. The vast canvas walls are threaded with gold, shimmering and catching the torchlight in 1,000 glittering points, creating a constellation of man-made stars. From its peaks, silken banners depicting the royal crest, a dragon-like creature of Parthian myth, snap softly in the night breeze. The ropes holding it taut are as thick as your arm, dyed a royal purple. You can hear the low murmur of voices from within, the clink of goblets, the distant strain of a harp. It's an edifice of pure, unapologetic power, a mountain of wealth planted in the earth. And you are walking toward it, with treason folded in your arms. You are not led inside the main chamber. The guard directs you to a smaller, secondary entrance at the rear, into a narrow passage formed by the tent's complex inner and outer walls. It's a service corridor, dimly lit and smelling of lamp oil and anxious silence. Wait here, the guard grunts, before leaving you alone. You stand in the narrow space, the opulent sounds from the main tent muffled by the thick layers of canvas. Screens of intricately carved sandalwood separate this passage from a smaller, more private chamber. Light and shadows dance through the carvings, and voices, low and urgent, drift through. You press yourself into the shadows, making yourself small, every instinct screaming at you to run. The tribute from Cherax is secured, a voice says. It is the dry rasp of the man who hired you. The portmaster understands his new loyalties. And the garrison at Seleucia? A second voice asks, this one deeper, gravelly. A military man. Their commander has been retired. His second is our man. He will hold the western bank of the Tigris and let Ardashir's forces cross unopposed. Quote, you freeze, your blood turning to ice water. This is it. This is the conversation you were never meant to hear. Through a gap in the sandalwood screen, you see them. 3 men. The cloaked man, his hood now down, revealing a severe, sharp-featured face you recognize from the lower rungs of the king's administration. The second is a burly, bearded general, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword. The third man makes your breath catch in your throat. He is pacing, his back to you. Artabanus moves his personal guard to the front tomorrow, the general says. He thinks a show of force will quell the rebellion in the ranks. The fool. It will, says the administrator, just not in the way he imagines. When his own guard turns on him, the line will break instantly. It will be a slaughter. He turns, and you see him gesture to the garment you made, which you had placed on a small table as instructed. Our man will be in the thick of it, That tunic you procured will keep him alive long enough to signal the charge. Quote, your creation, the lapis blue chiton. It is for a traitor who will stand next to the king, disguised as a loyal guard, and at the key moment, he will survive the ensuing chaos to lead the enemy. You feel sick. You, the pessimistic tailor who just wanted to earn her silver, have stitched the very armor for the king's assassin. A figure enters the chamber from another flap, and your heart plummets into the pit of your stomach. It is Nargis. She is dressed in her usual drab, practical clothes, a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. She looks utterly at home. She carries no tent canvas now, but a rolled-up leather map case. She nods to the men, her expression grimly professional. There is no surprise on their faces. She is one of them. The roots are marked, she says, her voice the same low growl you remember from her workshop. She unrolls the leather on a table. The secondary roads south of the river are unguarded. I had my caravan scout them myself. Ardashir's cavalry can bypass the royalist patrols and be at the king's flank by dawn. Quote, the general grunts in approval. Good work, tent maker. Your hatred for the Parthians serves us well. Quote, Nargis scoffs, a bitter, sharp sound. I don't hate Parthians. I hate weak, decadent fools who preen in silk robes while the empire rots. Artabanus and his peacocks taxed my caravans into ruin to pay for this gilded monstrosity. She gestures at the tent wall. Ardashir is a soldier. He understands that an empire is built on roads and trade, not on perfume and poetry. He will make the roads safe. That is all I care about. Your mind reels. Her contempt for the court wasn't just the bluster of a surly artisan. It was the cold fury of a revolutionary. The transaction in her workshop, your witty challenge, her grudging acceptance, it was all a charade. She knew exactly what the canvas was for. She was testing you, seeing if you were smart enough to be a problem, and she judged you a fool. The administrator taps the lapis garment. And the tailor? Is she a risk? Quote, Nargis glances toward the screen, and for a terrifying second you think her stony eyes meet yours. The silk stitcher? No, she's a coward. All she sees is the coin. But her cousin, the sailor Pharnaces, he travels the Gulf, he talks to too many people. He was asking questions in Carax. He could be a loose thread. Pharnaces. They know about Pharnaces. The blood drains from your face. This is no longer just about your survival. They have marked your family. Nargis, in her cold, pragmatic assessment, has just placed your cousin's life on the scales, and you know which way they will tip if he is deemed a threat. Her words are not just an observation. They are a hindrance, a complication woven directly into the fabric of your life, threatening to unravel everything. You came here fearing for your future. Now you fear for your cousin's life. He will be dealt with if he becomes a problem, the general says dismissively. One more sailor in a sea of corpses. They roll up the map. The administrator picks up a heavy purse from the table. Your final payment, Nargis, for the roots and for your continued silence. She takes it without a word. Her job here is done. As she turns to leave, the cloaked administrator gestures toward the passage where you are hiding. Bring in the tailor. Let's be done with this. Panic, sharp and absolute, seizes you. You have seconds to compose yourself. You have to walk in there, face the people who were just discussing your cousin's potential murder, and pretend you heard nothing. You have to look at Nargis, the woman who sold you the means of your entanglement, and then sold you out as a harmless fool. You smooth down your tunic, pick up the folded chiton, and step through the screen into the chamber, just as Nargis is about to exit. Your eyes meet for a fraction of a second. There is no recognition in her gaze, no flicker of complicity, only a cold, flat dismissal. She sees you as you are meant to be seen, an insignificant artisan, a tool to be used and discarded. To her, you are already invisible. You avoid looking at the general or the administrator, focusing on the table. The garment, as ordered, you say, your voice a stranger's, thin and reedy. The administrator picks up the second larger purse and tosses it to you. The weight of it in your hand is obscene. It feels like blood money. Your work is satisfactory, he says. A word of advice, Tailor. Your discretion is your most valuable asset. See that you do not lose it. You are dismissed. The finality in his tone is a clear threat. We know who you are. We know where to find you. You turn and walk away, not daring to look back. You don't run. You walk, step by measured step, out of the service passage, past the indifferent guards, through the jasmine-scented gardens, and out into the anonymous streets of the city. The gold coins in the purse are no longer a comfort. They are shackles. You have returned to reality, but it is not the reality you left. You went to the tent of gold as a tailor trying to survive a political storm. You have left as a witness to treason, a conspirator by proxy, and the keeper of a secret that could get you and everyone you love killed. The lesson you've learned is a brutal one. In the grand tapestry of power, some threads are meant to be woven in, and some are meant to be cut, and you have no idea which one you are. The walk home is a journey through a foreign country that looks deceptively like your own. Every dark alleyway is an ambush. Every pair of laughing soldiers by a wine shop seems to be watching you. The weight of the purse against your hip is a physical sickness. Each coin is a link in a chain, binding you to a conspiracy that will drown an empire in blood. You, Azar, the tailor who only wanted a quiet life, are now an accomplice to the fall of a king. You don't go to your mother's house. You can't. To face her, to see Farnes's trusting, worried face, would be to shatter. How could you sit and eat stew while the knowledge of his potential murder sat like a stone in your belly? Nargis's words echo, sharper than any needle. He could be a loose thread. *A thread to be snipped. The thought is a physical pain, a sharp stitch in your own heart. You return to your stall. The familiar smell of silk and thread offers no comfort. It smells of naivete, of a life that is already gone. You sit on your stool in the dark. The shrouded marketplace, a city of ghosts around you. You finger the heavy canvas of your stall's cover, a fabric you now understand. A fabric of secrets. What are your choices? You lay them out in your mind like cutting patterns on cloth. You could take the money and run. You, your mother, Farnaces. You could be on a ship by morning, sailing for the far shores of the Erythraean Sea. But Nargis's caravan network, the one she used to map the rebels' route, spans the known world. She said it herself. Where could you run that her eyes, or the eyes of her new masters, could not reach? Fleeing would be to admit guilt, to paint a target on your own backs. You could go to the authorities. But who? The city guard? The man who hired you was a court official. The general planning the betrayal was one of the king's own. The rot is not at the roots of the tree, it is in the very trunk, and you are just a beetle clinging to the bark. To report them would be to report yourself. They would silence you long before your words reached any honest ear, if such an ear even exists in Ctesiphon anymore. That leaves the third option, the one that makes your hands tremble. Do nothing. Stay silent. Take the silver and pray the storm passes over your small roof. Let the king fall. Let Ardashir rise. Empires change hands. It is the way of the world. Perhaps Nargis is right. Perhaps the new king will be better. But they will not forget the loose thread. Farnaces, with his sailor's loud mouth and his worried questions, will be a risk they will not tolerate. They will find an excuse. A port brawl, a pirate attack, a sudden storm in a calm sea. He will simply disappear, and you will have let it happen, your silence paid for with a purse of gold. The pessimism that has been your lifelong companion offers you a bitter truth. You are caught. All patterns lead to ruin, but as you sit there, surrounded by the tools of your trade, another thought takes root. A tailor does not just follow patterns. A tailor alters them. You must pull on a different thread, not the one that leads to the king or to the city guard, but the one that leads back to the source of the problem. To Nargis. She is the key. She is the only one you have spoken to, the only one whose reasons you have heard. She isn't just a political climber like the administrator, or a brute like the general. She is driven by something personal, a fury born of loss. I hate weak, decadent fools. Asterisk. There was a story in that hatred. And if she has a story, she has a heart, however walled off and stony it may be. It is a desperate gamble, a fool's hope, but it is the only one you have. You rise, leaving the purse of blood money behind in the darkness of your stall. You will not be carrying their coin when you face her. You have only your wits, and a fear for your cousin so profound it burns away your own. You walk back through the sleeping city, back towards the caravan grounds. Your steps sure and steady for the first time since you left the tent of gold. You are no longer drifting. You have a destination. The embers of 100 campfires glow like scattered jewels in the darkness of the caravan market. Nargis's workshop is a cavern of black shadow. lit only by a single flickering oil lamp on her workbench. She is not sleeping. She is sharpening the blade of a heavy-duty leather knife on a whetstone, the rhythmic asterisk, schlick, 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 asterisk of steel on stone the only sound. She hears your approach and looks up, her hand never ceasing its motion. Her eyes, catching the lamplight, are hard and unwelcoming. "Your part is done, Tailor," she says, her voice low and flat. "There is no reason for you to be here." Quote, "You stop just outside the circle of light, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. I was in the passage, behind the screen." The rhythmic sound stops. The silence that follows is more threatening than the noise was. Nargis sets the knife and stone down on the bench with slow, deliberate care. She doesn't look surprised. She looks annoyed, as if you are a persistent stain she has failed to scrub out. "I know," she says. "I smelled your perfume. The stink of the court clings to you." Quote, "The admission shocks you more than a denial would have. She knew you were there. She spoke of pharmacies, knowing you would hear it. It wasn't just an assessment, it was a warning, a threat delivered by proxy." "Then you know why I am here," you say, your voice steadier than you thought possible. "You are here to beg for your cousin's life," she says, picking up a wooden mallet and idly tapping it against her palm. "You are wasting your time. And mine. He has done nothing. He is a sailor, he hears gossip in ports. That is his life." "His life is an inconvenience," Nargis says coldly. "In the remaking of the world, inconveniences are removed. Ardashir will bring order. Order requires clean lines, no loose threads." "Loose threads?" You challenge, stepping forward into the light. All your fear has coalesced into a sharp, clear anger. You speak as if you are weaving a tapestry for the gods. You are planning a slaughter, and you want to murder my cousin because he talked to a harbor master. Nargis's eyes narrow into slits. "Be careful, Tailor. You survived tonight because I told them you were a harmless coward who cared only for coin. Do not prove me wrong." "And what do you care for, Nargis?" You press, your wit sharpened by desperation. "You said you wanted safe roads. An empire built on trade. My cousin is that trade. He is the man who sails the barges, who moves the grain and the spices. He is not a court peacock. He is a man with calloused hands, just like you. He is part of the world you claim you want to build. Killing him isn't bringing order. It's just bloodletting. The same cruelty, just with a different king's name on it." Quote, you see a flicker in her stony gaze. You struck a nerve. You are not begging. You are accusing her of hypocrisy, challenging the very foundation of her righteous fury. She takes a step towards you, the mallet held tight in her fist. "You know nothing of cruelty. You, who spend your days stitching gold onto silk for soft men who have never known a day of true work or true loss. You think this is about a name? About a king?" Her voice drops, and for the first time the growl is replaced by a raw, ragged pain. "Before Artabanus came to power, my father ran the largest caravan on the western route. We supplied 3 legions. He knew the roads, he knew the weather, he knew the tribes. He kept the trade flowing. Then Artabanus came. He doubled the transit taxes to pay for new mosaics in his palace. He replaced the veteran patrols on the roads with his favorites, pretty boys who knew more about wine than swordplay." Quote, she gestures around the workshop at the stacks of canvas. "The bandits grew bold. My father pleaded with the provincial governor for more guards. The governor demanded a bribe my father could not pay, so he sent him away. 6 months later, my father's caravan was ambushed in the Zagros passes. They took everything, the goods, the animals. They killed the guards who fought. They left my father and my husband staked out under the sun." Her voice is ice. "I am the one who found them." You want to talk about cruelty, Silk Stitcher? Go find a man you love, his tongue black and swollen, his skin cracked open by the sun, and then come and tell me I don't know the meaning of the word. Quote, the story hangs in the air between you, horrible and real. Your fear for Pharnaces is now matched by a terrible understanding of her. This isn't politics for her. It is vengeance. It is a desperate, bloody attempt to correct a world that has wronged her beyond all measure. "I am sorry," you whisper, and the words are true. "I am sorry for your loss." "I don't want your pity," she snarls, turning away. "I want a world where that cannot happen again. Ardashir is a soldier. He will make the roads safe. If the price for that is 1 king and a few loose threads, it is a price I will gladly pay." Quote, And you think he will be different, you ask, your voice pleading now, not for mercy, but for reason. Another king, another set of taxes, another set of favorites. The world doesn't change, Nargis. Only the names of the powerful. You are helping to replace one tyrant with another, and calling it justice. He is better than this one. She whirls back on you, her face a mask of fury. This tent of gold, this city of silk and lies. It is a disease. It has to be burned away. Then burn it, you cry out, taking the final, most dangerous step. But don't become the disease yourself. You think killing a man like my cousin makes the world cleaner? It just makes your hands dirtier. It makes you just like them. A person who crushes the small to serve the great. You talk of building a better world, but you are willing to build it on the bones of innocent men. There is no honor in that. It is just power. The very thing you claim to hate. She stares at you, her chest rising and falling, the mallet held in a white-knuckled grip. You have pushed her to the very edge. She could strike you down right now and be done with it. You have seen the core of her, and you have held a mirror up to it. For a long, terrible moment, she says nothing. The only sound is the distant barking of a dog, and the frantic beat of your own heart. Then, with a sigh that seems to drain all the fight out of her, she tosses the mallet onto the workbench. It lands with a heavy, final clatter. He cannot stay in Ctesiphon, she says, her voice flat, exhausted. He cannot sail the Gulf. The general, the administrator, they are not sentimental. They will hear he is asking questions, and they will kill him. She looks at you, her eyes filled with a weary darkness. Get him out, tonight. There is a grain barge leaving for the northern trade route at dawn, heading for the Caspian Sea. Tell him to be on it. Tell him not to show his face south of the mountains until the crows have picked Artabanus's bones clean and a new king's authority is absolute. If he is seen, I cannot protect him. It is not an absolution, it is a stay of execution, a frantic, terrifying task. Go, she says, turning her back on you, picking up her leather knife once more. And do not ever come back here. I have paid one debt to your foolish courage tonight. I will not pay another. You back away, out of the light, your mind reeling. You have won. You have stared into the needle's eye and passed through. But the relief is cold and fleeting, instantly replaced by the crushing urgency of the task ahead. You have saved Pharnaces from the conspirators, but now you have to save him from himself. You have to make him run. And you have until dawn. You run. Not with the frantic, clumsy panic of a cornered animal, but with the focused, ground-eating gait of a messenger carrying a vital dispatch. The alleys of Ctesiphon are a familiar map etched into your memory, and you navigate them by instinct, your feet slapping softly on the cool flagstones. Each shadow is a hiding place, each corner a potential threat. Nargis's words are a frantic pulse in your veins. Get him out. Tonight, you have until dawn. Dawn. The word is a death sentence. It is the hour of executions, the hour when the night's secrets are exposed by the unforgiving light. You push yourself harder, your lungs burning, your mind racing ahead. Your mother's house is a small, quiet island in the sleeping city. A single lamp burns in the main room. You slip through the unlocked door like a ghost, your heart aching at the thought of the terror you are about to bring into this peaceful space. Your mother is asleep on her mat in the corner, her breathing slow and even. Pharnaces is not. He is sitting at the small wooden table, a cup of wine untouched before him, his massive shoulders slumped in a posture of utter dejection. He looks up as you enter, his face a mess of confusion and relief. Azar! I was so worried. The city. It feels wrong tonight. I couldn't sleep. We have to go, you say, your voice a harsh whisper. You grab his arm, your grip surprisingly strong. Now, Pharnaces. Not in an hour. Not in a minute. Now. He blinks, pulling his arm back. Go? Go where? Azar, what is this? You look like you've seen a demon. Worse, you say, your eyes darting to your sleeping mother. You cannot wake her. A long, drawn-out goodbye is a luxury you cannot afford. It would be a cruelty. You pull him towards the door. Listen to me, cousin. The whispers we heard? They were true. The king is falling. Tonight. It's happening as we speak. The gods protect us, he breathes, his face paling. But we should bar the door, hunker down, wait for it to pass. It will not pass over us. You hiss, your desperation making your voice sharp. They know you. They know you are asking questions in Carex. You've been marked as a sympathizer. A problem. When the new men take control, they will be cleaning house. You understand what that means? He stares at you, his sailor's mind, used to the clear dangers of reefs and storms, struggling to grasp the serpentine logic of courtly purges. But I am loyal. I've done nothing. Your innocence is a liability. It makes you predictable, you snap, dragging him out into the small courtyard. The air is still, but you can feel it now, a low, thrumming vibration in the earth, the distant sound of a gathering storm. There is a grain barge at the northern docks. It leaves for the Caspian trade route at dawn. You will be on it. The Caspian? Azar, that's halfway to the frozen wastes. My ship, my crew, my whole life is here on the Gulf. Quote, you have no life here anymore. The words are brutal, but they have to be. You grab his tunic, forcing him to look at you. Farnesses, I am not asking you. I am telling you. Someone who is part of this change told me directly. They will kill you. They will make it look like an accident, and your body will wash up on a sandbar a week from now. Is that the life you want? A sudden sound cuts through the night, sharp and terrifying. It is not the sound of a gathering storm, but the storm itself breaking. A single brazen horn blast from the direction of the palace, answered by a cacophony of shouts and the sudden, panicked ringing of a temple bell. The coup is no longer a secret. It is a reality screaming through the streets. Farnesses' face goes slack with terror. The abstract threat has become a horn blast and a scream. He finally understands. My mother, he whispers, looking back at the house. She is safer if you are gone, you say, your own heartbreaking. If they come looking for you and you are here, they will take her too. Your best gift to her now is your absence. I will look after her. I swear it. He nods, his big frame trembling. The anchor has found his mooring. In you. He trusts you. The weight of that trust is immense. But you shoulder it. What do? We move, you say, pulling him into the labyrinth. Stay low. Don't speak. And for the love of all the gods, do not look like you are fleeing for your life. Quote, it is an impossible request. The city has transformed around you. What were quiet streets are now rivers of panicked people, flowing away from the palace. Doors are being slammed shut and barred. From the wealthier districts, you can hear the splintering of wood and screams of a different kind, the sound of looting, of vengeance. A man in a fine peacock blue silk robe, a robe that could have been made by your own hands, sprints past you, his face a mask of terror, followed by 3 men with cudgels and the hungry look of jackals. They don't even shout a political slogan. They just want his purse, his rings, his life. This is Ardashir's new order. Nargis's clean lines. It looks like brutal chaos. You drag Farnesses into a narrow alley smelling of soured wine and refuse, pressing yourselves against a wall as a patrol of soldiers marches past. But their armor is different. Less ornate than the Parthian guard. Their helmets are a different shape. They carry unfamiliar standards, bearing the mark of a new dynasty. They are Ardashir's men. They are already here. They move with the brutal efficiency of conquerors, their eyes sweeping the crowds, not for enemies, but for resistance, for any sign of trouble. One of them looks right at you, his gaze cold and flat, and you hold your breath, expecting the worst, but he moves on. You are not important enough. Not yet. They're here, Farnesses breathes, his voice tight with awe and fear. It's over. Artabanus is defeated. Which means our danger has just begun, you mutter, pulling him along. You abandon the main thoroughfares, using the tailor's knowledge of the city's hidden veins, the service alleys behind the dye makers, the enclosed courtyards of the Weavers' Guild, the passages that stink of offal behind the butcher's stalls. The sounds of the coup are a constant backdrop, the rhythmic tramp of marching soldiers, the isolated screams, the roaring of a fire somewhere to the south. You pass a small square where a statue of Artabanus IV has been pulled down. Children, caught up in the terrible glee of destruction, are throwing rocks at the fallen bronze head while their parents cart away valuables from a nearby nobleman's ransacked home. You see a flash of dark canvas and hard-edged competence across the square. It's Nargis. She is not participating in the looting. She stands with 2 of Ardashir's soldiers, pointing down a street, giving directions, her face grim and focused. She is an architect of this moment, directing the flow of power through the city she knows so well. Her eyes sweep the square, and for a heartbeat, they pause in your direction. There is no recognition. There is only the cold, pragmatic gaze of a woman remaking the world. And you see in that moment that she would sacrifice you just as easily as she saved you, if the new order required it. She is not your ally. She is a force of nature you have barely survived. You pull furnaces away before he can be seen, your heart hammering. The sight of her has made the threat absolute. She is with them. She is part of the new power. And her mercy has a shelf life of exactly one night. The northern docks are a scene of controlled chaos. This is not the panicked flight of the rich from the southern harbors. This is the desperate escape of the working class. Families huddle with bundles. Merchants argue with bargemen, trying to buy passage on vessels laden with grain, lumber, and raw wool. The air smells of river mud, wet rope, and fear. "Which one?" Farnaces asks, scanning the dozens of flat-bottomed barges moored to the quay. "A grain barge," you say, repeating Nargis's instructions. "For the Caspian route." You scan the boats, looking for signs of imminent departure, for crews making ready. You see it. A long, wide vessel, low in the water, its deck piled high with burlap sacks. A grizzled captain is shouting at his two-man crew to cast off the mooring lines. "That one," you say, breaking into a run. You grab a fistful of silver from the purse you carry. The first purse. The one for the commission, not the blood money still hidden in your stall. You shove it into the captain's hand as you reach the barge. "2 passengers," you say, pushing a stunned Farnaces toward the gangplank. The captain looks at the silver, then at your faces. He's a riverman. He's seen 1,000 desperate men in his time. He doesn't need to ask questions. The silver is enough. "Get on," he grunts. "We're leaving." Quote. Farnaces stumbles onto the deck. He turns back to you, his face a canvas of disbelief. He is leaving everything. His ship, his home, his past. Azar. "Go north," you say, your voice firm, anchoring him one last time. "Do not stop. Do not send word. Do not come back until the world has settled. Survive, Farnaces. That is all that matters." You grip his hand, the calloused palm of a sailor against the calloused fingers of a tailor. 2 men of Ctesiphon, 2 men with trades, caught in the gears of history. "I will watch over her," you promise again. He nods, his eyes welling up. The crew shoves the barge away from the dock. A gap of dark, swirling water opens between you. It widens, second by second, an impassable river. Farnaces stands among the sacks of grain, a giant of a man made small by circumstance, watching you as the barge is caught by the current and begins its slow journey north. You stand on the quay until the barge is just a dark shape in the growing pre-dawn light, a ghost ship sailing towards an unknown future. The sounds of the city roar behind you, the birth pangs of a new, violent age. You have done it. You have snipped the loose thread. You have saved your cousin. But as you turn back to face the city you have just condemned him from, a profound and chilling loneliness settles over you. You are utterly alone, a tailor with blood on your needles, a witness to treason, an accomplice to a new regime you already despise. You have returned from the tent of gold. But the lesson you learned was not about overcoming hardship. It was that in the great, terrible machine of the world, some parts are designed to be broken. And you are left standing among the pieces. The dark shape of the barge shrank against the graying water, a piece of your life being carried away by the river. For a single hollow moment, you felt the cold triumph of survival. You had done it. You had saved him. The weight of that final promise to Farnaces, "I will watch over her," settled upon you, a new and solitary purpose. But as you turned from the river, the sounds of the city rushed back in, and with them, a new, chilling realization. You had snipped a loose thread, but you were still holding the shears. Your eyes swept the docks. The chaos was becoming organized. Ardashir's soldiers, the ones with the unfamiliar helmets, were moving with purpose now. They weren't just patrolling. They were taking control. A squad of them was marching down the quay, their captain pointing, issuing orders. They were seizing the docks, sealing the river. Nargis's escape route, her single act of mercy, had an expiration, and it was now. Panic, cold and absolute, gripped you. The barge wasn't an escape. It was a flagged vessel, a single boat heading north, while the rest of the city was locked down. It would be an easy target for a patrol boat to intercept just a few miles upriver. You hadn't saved Farnaces. You had put him in a gilded cage and pushed it into a river of crocodiles. And what of you? The tailor who delivered the trader's armor. The man who heard the plot. The one Nargis called a, quote, harmless coward. How long would her assessment hold? How long until the administrator decided his second purse of gold wasn't enough to guarantee your silence? You had to get Farnese back. You had to run. Together. Farnese! The name was ripped from your throat. A raw, desperate shout. You ran along the riverbank, stumbling over discarded ropes and loose stones, your eyes fixed on the retreating barge. The crew turned, startled. Farnes's, a silhouette against the dawn, leaned over the side. Jump! You screamed, waving your arms frantically. They're sealing the port! Jump now! Quote. You saw the hesitation, the confusion on his face, even from a distance. Then he looked back towards the city, saw the advancing soldiers, and understood. Without a second thought, the big man clambered over the sacks of grain and threw himself into the cold, swirling water of the Tigris. The splash was huge. The river captain shouted a curse, but didn't stop. He had his silver. One less passenger was not his concern. You waded into the shallows, the icy water soaking your clothes, and hauled your spluttering, gasping cousin onto the muddy bank. He lay there for a moment, shivering, water pouring from his hair and beard. They were closing it, he coughed, disbelief in his voice. It was a lie, you said, your teeth chattering from a cold that had nothing to do with the river. Or a half-truth. Enough to get you out of her sight. We can't go north. We can't stay here. You hauled him to his feet. We have to go south. South? Farnes looked at you as if you'd gone mad. South is nothing. It's desert. It's the devil's anvil. We'll die in a week. We'll die by noon if we stay here, you countered, pulling him back into the labyrinth of alleys. The desert doesn't have patrols. It doesn't have administrators or generals. It only has sun and sand. I'll take my chances with the sun. And so your journey began, not on a barge heading towards the civilized trade routes of the north, but on foot, heading into the vast, hostile emptiness to the south. You scavenged what you could. 2 waterskins, purchased for an exorbitant price from a terrified street vendor. A loaf of hard bread and a bag of dates. You returned to your stall for the purse of blood money, the heavy gold now a grim necessity, and a sturdy needle and thread. Every instinct screamed at you to see your mother one last time, but you couldn't. The risk was too great. Your final act of love was to vanish completely. The first day was a lesson in humility. The city's edge gave way to scrubland, which in turn dissolved into a rolling sea of pale sand and black rock. The sun, a distant, benevolent friend in the shaded alleys of Ctesiphon, became a relentless enemy. It beat down on you, leaching the moisture from your skin, cracking your lips, pounding on your skull. You, Azar the tailor, whose hardest physical labor was forcing a needle through thick canvas, felt your body begin to fail within hours. Your fine-spun tunic offered no protection. It just became a sweat-soaked rag. Farnes's, for all his strength, fared little better. He was a man of water, of humid air, and the shade of a sail. The dry, searing heat seemed to confuse his body. He lumbered along, his face flushed, his breathing heavy. His dependent nature, which you had always seen as a weakness, now manifested as a constant stream of complaints. The sun, it's like a hammer. My throat feels like it's full of sand. Are you sure this is the right way, Azar? It all looks the same. There is no right way, Farneses, you grunted, shielding your eyes to look at the shimmering horizon. There is only a way, single, quote. By the second day, your pessimism felt less like a philosophy and more like a simple statement of fact. This was a mistake. You had traded a quick death for a slow one. The water in your skins was already half gone, and it had taken on a foul, leathery taste. The bread was gone. The dates were a sticky, grit-filled memory. At night, the temperature plummeted, the profound cold seeping into your bones, a cruel counterpoint to the day's fire. You huddled together for warmth behind a rock outcropping, the sky above a terrifyingly vast blanket of stars, each one a cold, indifferent eye. It was on the third day that you almost broke. The water was nearly gone. Farnes's, stumbling over a rock, fell hard. His waterskin, tied carelessly to his belt, burst upon impact. The precious liquid vanished into the thirsty sand in seconds. He stared at the dark, wet patch, his face crumbling. It's gone, he whispered. He looked up at you, his eyes wide with a childlike despair. "It's over. We're finished, Azar." He sat down heavily in the sand and refused to move. "We should have stayed. A quick blade is better than this." Quote, "You looked at him, at his broad, defeated shoulders, and felt a surge of your own despair. He was right. This was hopeless." The witty, cynical tailor in you wanted to agree, to sit down beside him and make a final, dark joke about the inefficiency of dying from thirst. But then you saw Nargis's face in your mind's eye, her cold pronouncement. "In the remaking of the world, inconveniences are removed." Asterisk. You saw the administrator's dismissive sneer. They had written you off as insignificant, as dust to be swept away. And a new feeling, one you had never truly known, stirred within you. Not pessimism, not fear. It was defiance, a stubborn, gritty refusal to perish according to their plan. "Get up, Phroneses," you said, your voice raw. "No, leave me. Save yourself." "Save myself with what?" You snapped, kicking at the sand. "With my deep knowledge of stitching? With my skill at charming court functionaries? You are 3 times my size, and you have sailed through storms that would tear this desert in two. Your body is strong, so you will lend me your strength. My mind is still working, so I will lend you my will. We are not 2 men, we are 1 chance. Now get up!" He stared at you, shocked by your vehemence. Slowly, reluctantly, he rose to his feet. You handed him your water skin. 1 mouthful, every hour, that's all. From that moment, something shifted. The journey was no less brutal, but your approach to it changed. You were no longer just fleeing. You were fighting. You took charge, your tailor's mind for detail finding new applications. You tore strips from the bottom of your tunic and showed Pharnaces how to wrap them around his head and face, a makeshift defense against the sun and wind. At night, huddled against the cold, you took out your needle and thread and meticulously stitched the torn seam of his waterskin, reinforcing it, making it stronger than before. "I never thought I'd see you so leather," Pharnaces murmured, watching your nimble fingers work in the moonlight. "It's just a different kind of silk," you replied, not looking up, "and a much more important client." Quote. Pharnaces, in turn, began to contribute more than just his strength. His sailor's skills, seemingly useless on this ocean of sand, began to find their purpose. He taught you how to navigate by the stars, ensuring you kept a true southern course. "That one," he'd point with a thick finger at a point of light, "is the mariner's friend. She never wanders. As long as we keep her behind our left shoulder, we are heading towards the Gulf." He taught you knots you had never seen, strong and reliable for securing your sparse supplies. You learned the rhythms of the desert. You rested during the inferno of midday in the shade of a rare, skeletal bush or a rocky overhang, and you walked in the cooler hours of the morning and the long twilight of evening. You learned to read the ground, to spot the faint lines that indicated a dry riverbed where digging might reveal a seep of brackish, life-giving water. You learned that resilience wasn't about being strong. It was about being smart. It was about rationing, about conserving energy, about seeing the world not as a tailor or a sailor, but as a survivor. Your conversations dwindled from complaints to a sparse, functional language. Water. Quote, "Rockfall there. Go left." Quote, 2 hours till sunset. But in the silence, a new kind of communication grew. A shared glance when you found a patch of dry, edible berries. A quiet nod of encouragement when one of you stumbled. You were becoming a team, your reliance on each other no longer the panicked dependency of a child on a parent, but the calculated codependence of 2 soldiers in a battle against the world. You, the pessimistic wit, had become the strategist. He, the dependent strongman, had become the engine. On the 7th day, you crested a high dune, your bodies gaunt, your faces burned and bearded, your clothes little more than rags. The landscape below was the same endless expanse of sun-bleached sand. Pharnaces let out a groan of despair, but you held up a hand, your eyes narrowed. "Wait," you whispered. Your tailor's eye, trained to spot the tiniest flaw in a weave, the slightest variation in a dye, saw something. It wasn't a city. It wasn't an oasis. It was a line. A faint, unnaturally straight line etched across the dunes far to the southeast. It was barely visible, a whisper on the landscape. Pharnaces squinted, his sailor's eyes accustomed to scanning vast horizons. "What is it, a trick of the light?" "No," you said, "a flicker of something you hadn't felt in a lifetime, hope igniting in your chest. A trick of the light doesn't hold that straight. That was made by wheels. Or feet. Hundreds of them, walking in a line. It was a caravan route, old, perhaps unused for years, but it was there. A thread of humanity woven into the desolation. It was a sign. A path. It might lead to a well. It might lead to a hidden outpost. It might lead to bandits and death. But it was a direction. It was a choice. And it was the first thing in a week that hadn't been sand or sky. You looked at Farnaces, and he looked at you. No words were needed. You adjusted the water skin on your shoulder, turned your faces to the southeast, and began to walk towards the line, into the desert's deeper, more uncertain embrace. The line was a promise and a torment. For 2 more days it remained a faint, unchanging scratch on the horizon, a goal that seemed to recede as you walked towards it. The desert played with your mind, turning distant rocks into crouching figures and the heat shimmer into lakes of cool water. But the line, that thin trace of human passage, remained stubbornly real. It became your compass, your prayer, the single focus that kept you from collapsing into the sand and letting the wind have you. You walked in a rhythm born of shared misery and grim determination. Farnaces, a little more gaunt, a little more grim, no longer complained. He had found a new role. He was the scout. His sailor's eyes, accustomed to spotting land from a sea of sameness, were better at discerning the subtle shifts in the landscape. You, in turn, were the quartermaster, the keeper of the water, the one who decided when to rest and when to push on. The silence between you was no longer one of despair, but of conservation, each man hoarding his breath and his energy. It was during a rest, in the thin, inadequate shade of a towering sandstone pillar, that Farnaces finally gave voice to the thoughts that had clearly been churning behind his sun-wearied eyes. He was staring back north, though there was nothing to see but endless dunes. "I saw him once, you know," he said, his voice a dry rasp. "King Artabanus. Not up close like you. I was just a boy. He had a triumphal procession through Ctesiphon after a victory on the eastern border. I sat on my father's shoulders to see over the crowd." He paused, a faint smile touching his cracked lips. "He rode a white horse, Azar, covered in a blanket of gold cloth. The sun hit him, and it was like a god had come down to earth. The whole street was cheering. They threw flowers. I thought a man like that could never be defeated. That the world he ruled was as solid as the stones of the palace." He looked at you, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "What happened?" "You were there. You saw the inside of the machine. Was he a bad king?" Quote, "You leaned your head back against the warm stone, closing your eyes. The question, so simple, was impossibly complex. How could you explain the slow decay, the rot that smelled not of death but of expensive perfume?" "He wasn't a bad king, Farnaces," you began slowly, choosing your words like you chose your stitches. "Not in the way a butcher is bad, or a thief. He was an absent one. The world he ruled was the one inside the tent of gold. The rest of us, the city, the empire, we were just the servants bringing him his wine." Quote, "You thought of the peacock blue silk robe you had been finishing, the one that now lay buried under the rubble of your ransacked stall. I once spent a week embroidering a single sleeve with threads of pure gold. It was for a minor minister, a man whose only job was to announce the king's dinner menu. The cost of that one sleeve could have fed a family for a year. The minister complained that the shade of gold wasn't joyful enough." Quote, Farnaces grunted, a sound of disgust. "That was the court," you continued, opening your eyes to stare at the merciless blue sky. "It was a contest to see who could waste the most, who could be the most beautifully useless. They built palaces of illusion while the foundations of the real world crumbled. Remember the new port tax? The one that almost put your ship's owner out of business?" Quote, "He said it was to fund the legions," Farnaces muttered. "It was to fund a new mosaic floor for the royal baths," you said flatly. "I know because I saw the designs. The general in charge of the Western Road, the one whose neglect led to people getting hurt, he was given his post because his wife was a cousin of the king's favorite poet. He didn't know the difference between a supply road and a goat track. He just knew which wine to serve at a party. The rebellion didn't happen because Ardashir is a great man, Farnaces. It happened because the palace was a hollow gourd, beautifully painted on the outside, but rotten and empty within. All Ardashir had to do was squeeze." You fell silent, the truth of your own words settling in your chest. You had always known this, abstractly. You had made 1,000 cynical jokes about it to yourself as you sewed. But to say it aloud, here in this stark, honest wasteland, gave it a new and terrible weight. You hadn't just been a tailor. You had been an accomplice, stitching the very fabric of the lie. Farnaces was quiet for a long time, digesting this. His simple, reverent image of the Golden King on the white horse had been replaced by a vain man in a perfumed bath, ignoring the pleas of his people. So Nargis was right, he finally said, his voice low. The name, unspoken between you since that terrible night, landed with the force of a stone. You flinched. You had not told him the tent-maker's story, only that you had been warned. Yes, you admitted, your throat tight. She was. You pushed on, the conversation leaving a residue of bitter truth in the air. The faint line on the horizon grew, imperceptibly, broader. It was no longer a scratch, but a smudge. Closer. That evening, as you prepared to rest, you faced your own small collapse. You went to take a sip from the water skin and found it lighter than you expected. You checked the level. It was dangerously low. Your heart sank. Your careful rationing, your meticulous planning. It wasn't enough. The desert was simply too vast, its thirst too great. Your old self, the pessimist from the Cetaphon market, rose up in you like a specter. This is it, Asterisk, it whispered. You tried. You put on a brave little show. But the ending is always the same. The house always wins. Asterisk. You felt the familiar, cold paralysis creeping into your limbs, the desire to just sit, to let the inevitable happen. But then you looked at Farnaces. He was asleep, his huge body curled against the cold, his face peaceful for the first time in days. He was alive because of you. He had thrown himself into a river, abandoned his life, and followed you into this hell on the strength of your word alone. His trust was a physical weight, a responsibility that you could not set down. You stood up and walked away from your small camp, your mind a turmoil. You looked up at the sky, at the brilliant, cold stars Farnaces had taught you to read. They were no longer indifferent eyes. They were a map, a tool, a chance. Your pessimism wasn't wrong. The world was a dangerous, often cruel place. The odds were stacked against you. What had been wrong was your reaction to it. In Ctesiphon, your pessimism had been a shield you hid behind. It was an excuse for inaction. The world is terrible, so why bother? Stitch your robes, take your coin, and hope the storm misses you. Asterisk. But the storm hadn't missed you. It had swallowed you whole. Here, in the desert, hiding was not an option. Action was the only currency that mattered. And your pessimism, that deep, instinctual understanding of everything that could go wrong, was not a weakness. It was a weapon. You knew the water was low, so you would find more. You knew the sun was a killer, so you would respect it. You knew the world was not kind, so you would not rely on kindness. You would rely on your own wits, your own will, and on the man sleeping 20 paces away. A strange feeling washed over you, as cool and cleansing as the water you so desperately craved. It was not the giddy, foolish hope of a prayer answered. It was a harder, grittier thing. A purpose. You had spent your life stitching illusions for powerful men. Now your purpose was real. It was tangible. It was the life of your cousin. It was your own survival. In the heart of this wasteland, on the edge of death, you had finally found a reason to live that was more compelling than the fear of dying. You took out your needle and thread, not to mend a garment, but to mend a tear in your own spirit. You would not let your story end here, a footnote in some administrator's ledger. You would be the tailor of your own fate. One desperate, defiant stitch at a time. You walked back to the camp and lay down, not with despair, but with a plan. Your mind, which once idled on shades of silk, now worked on the geometry of survival. The caravan route, the terrain, the water. You would not despair. You would calculate. The next afternoon, you reached it. The smudge on the horizon resolved itself into a wide, shallow depression in the landscape. A path worn into the stony ground by 1,000 years of hooves and wheels. It was real. You had made it. Farnaces let out a whoop of joy and slid down the final dune, landing on the ancient road with a thud. You followed more slowly, your eyes scanning, analyzing. The road was old, the tracks faint, but it was a testament. Others had walked this path. Others had survived. Near the center of the track, half buried in the sand, was a piece of dark red pottery, the curved shard of a large amphora. You knelt and picked it up. It was cool to the touch. It had once held water or wine. It was a message from the past, an echo. Jen, we were here, we passed this way. You held it in your palm, the weight of it solid and real. It was not a promise of an easy journey ahead. The road stretched south into an unknown haze. But it was proof that survival was possible. It was the first stitch in a new pattern. Farnesses looked at you, his face split by a wide, relieved grin. We did it, Azar! A road! We're saved! You looked from the shard in your hand to your cousin's hopeful face, and then down the long, empty road. The pessimist in you saw the leagues of unknown danger, but the survivor, the man forged in the crucible of the last 10 days, saw something else. No, Farnesses, you said, and for the first time in your life your voice held no trace of cynicism, only a quiet, unshakable certainty. We just saved ourselves. You followed the ancient road as if it were a lifeline. It was no grand highway, merely a wide, hard-packed scar on the face of the desert, but to you, it was the most beautiful sight in the world. It was a path made by people, and where people go, there is water. The logic was simple, brutal, and the only thing you clung to. The water in your last skin was a few mouthfuls of warm, sloshing despair. Thirst was no longer a discomfort. It was a constant, physical presence, a claw scraping at the back of your throat. Farnesses, walking beside you, had a new stillness about him. His sailor's eyes, once scanning the flat horizon of the Gulf, now scanned the dunes. He pointed not to clouds promising rain, but to the way the sand drifted against a rock formation. The wind blows from the west here, he'd state, a simple observation that helped you angle your bodies to conserve energy. He could read the subtle language of the land now, a dialect of the sea he had known all his life. Your own world had shrunk to the essentials. Your mind, once occupied with the intricate politics of the court and the foibles of silk, was now a ledger of survival. Every step was a cost, every sip of water a debit. You measured the day not in hours, but in the slow, inexorable march of shadows. Your pessimism, once a witty, decorative cloak, had been burned away, leaving behind the hard, unadorned steel of pragmatism. Hope was a fool's luxury. Planning was a survivor's tool. 3 days you followed the road. 3 days of grit in your teeth, and a sun that hammered you into the anvil of the earth. On the morning of the 4th day, your water was gone. You shared the last wet drop from the skin, the canvas tasting of dust and finality. You did not speak of it, there was nothing to say, you simply walked on, your steps slower, your bodies crying out for a release you refused to give them. It was Farnesses who saw it first. He stopped, his body rigid, and raised a trembling hand. Azar, he rasped, his voice cracked. Look. You followed his gaze. Far ahead, where the heat haze made the world tremble, was a smudge of green. Not the sickly pale green of a hardy desert shrub, but a deep, vibrant green. The green of life. It could be a mirage. The desert was a master tailor of illusions, after all. You knew better than to trust it. But as you watched, a bird, a real bird, swooped across the sky in that direction. You began to walk faster, then to stumble, then to run. It was a clumsy, painful gait, a race against the collapse of your own bodies. The green smudge grew, resolving itself into the distinct shapes of palm trees, clustered together in a miraculous congregation. Below them you saw the glint of sun on water. You fell, rather than arrived, into the shade of the first palms. The air was blessedly cool, thick with the scent of damp earth and vegetation. A small, clear pool, fed by a seep from a rock face, shimmered before you. You plunged your faces into it, drinking in great, greedy gulps that hurt your shrunken stomachs. The water was the sweetest thing you had ever tasted. For a long time you simply lay by its edge, letting the reality of it soak into you. You had made it. This was no grand city. It was an oasis, a small clutch of life clinging to a wellspring. Perhaps 24 mud brick homes, flat-roofed and sturdy, were clustered near the pool. Date palms, heavy with fruit, provided a canopy of shade. You could see enclosures for goats and a few hardy-looking camels. It was a place of subsistence, not of luxury. It was perfect. Your arrival did not go unnoticed. People emerged from their homes, not with welcoming smiles, but with the wary, assessing gaze of those who live on the edge. They were lean, sun-darkened people, their clothes practical and patched. The men carried herding crooks that could double as weapons. The women watched you with hard, intelligent eyes. An older man, his beard white but his back straight, stepped forward. He was clearly the elder, the leader. "You are far from any road a sane man travels," he said, his voice as dry as the land around him. His eyes took in your ragged clothes, your gaunt faces, your Ctesiphon-made waterskin. "Who are you?" Pharnaces, his old deference returning, started to stammer an explanation. You placed a hand on his arm, silencing him. You stepped forward, bowing your head slightly, a gesture not of subservience but of respect. "We are travelers who lost our way," you said, your voice steady. "My name is Azar. This is my cousin Pharnaces. We are not bandits. We are not soldiers. We have a little silver for food, and we have our hands. We seek only to rest, and to earn our keep until we can find our way again." The elder considered you, his gaze lingering on your hands. He saw the calluses on Pharnaces' palms, the sign of a man used to heavy ropes. He saw the fine, needle-pricked calluses on your own fingertips. "What work do hands like yours know, in a place like this?" he asked, a hint of challenge in his tone. "My cousin is a rigger," you replied, choosing the word carefully. "He knows ropes and knots better than any man I have ever met. I am a mender. I can make old things new again." The elder grunted, a non-committal sound. "We have water and shade. You may share them. We have little food to spare, but you may trade for what you can. Your place here is your own to make." He turned and walked away, the other villagers melting back into their homes. The audience was over. You had been granted a reprieve, not a welcome. In the days that followed, you learned the rhythm of the oasis. It was a life dictated by the sun and the well. Every person had a role, every action a purpose. There were no illusions here, no wasted motions. You saw how the community functioned as a single organism. The women would grind grain. The men would tend the animals. The children would gather fallen dates. It was a world away from the decadent individualism of the court. You did not wait to be asked. Pharnaces saw the main rope for the community well was frayed, its strands thinned by years of use. He approached the elder, and with a series of quick, powerful movements, used his knowledge of splices to weave the weakened sections back together, making the rope stronger than it had been before. The elder watched, saying nothing, but a flicker of approval crossed his face. You took out your needle, the small piece of polished bone you had guarded so carefully, and a spool of sturdy thread. You went from family to family, offering your services. At first, they were suspicious, but when you took a child's tunic, its sleeve nearly torn off, and repaired it with stitches so fine and strong they were almost invisible, word began to spread. You reinforced the worn corners of goat hair tents. You patched leather waterskins until they were watertight once more. You did not work with silk and gold, but with rough-spun wool and thick canvas. And you had never felt such satisfaction in your work. Each stitch was not an adornment. It was a small act of defiance against entropy, a contribution to the survival of this small, fragile community. One evening, a fierce windstorm swept down from the north, tearing at the large, communal awning that shaded the central well. The people struggled to hold it down as the wind threatened to rip it to shreds. It was their main gathering place, the heart of the oasis. Pharnaces, seeing the strain on the ropes, shouted orders, directing the men to anchor the lines, using knots they had never seen before, knots that tightened under pressure instead of slipping. Meanwhile, you saw the true problem. The grommets, the reinforced holes where the ropes were tied, were tearing out. The canvas itself was sound, but its connection points were failing. Nargis, you thought, a fleeting bitter memory of her workshop. You saw her hammering grommets with powerful, efficient blows. You understood the principle. "Bring me strips of leather," you shouted over the wind, "and a sharp awl." While Pharnaces and the men secured the ropes, you worked furiously, your fingers flying. You cut the leather into reinforcing patches, punched new holes, and used your strongest thread to sew them around the tearing grommets. You were not just patching, you were redesigning, strengthening the awning's weakest points, just as you had been forced to strengthen your own. When the wind finally died down, the awning was still standing, battered but secure. The elder came to you, a new expression in his eyes. It was not just approval, it was respect. "You said you were a mender," he said, looking at your handiwork. "You are more than that. You are a craftsman." He looked at Farnes, who was coiling the ropes with practiced ease. "Both of you are." From that day on, you were no longer outsiders. You were part of the oasis. You had a home. Weeks turned into months. A new season began. The brutal heat of summer softened into a milder autumn. You and Farnes built your own small dwelling on the edge of the settlement, a sturdy hut of mud brick and palm thatch. Farnes, his broad shoulders tanned and powerful, had found a quiet confidence. He was no longer the dependent cousin looking to you for answers. He was a respected figure, the man they turned to when something needed to be built, lifted, or secured. You sat outside your home one evening, watching the sun set, painting the endless dunes in hues of rose and violet. Farnes was inside, humming a sailor's tune as he carved a wooden toy for one of the village children. A profound sense of peace settled over you, a feeling so alien you barely recognized it. You thought of the tent of gold, a world away. You imagined the new king, Ardashir, sitting on his throne. You imagined Nargis, perhaps now a wealthy and powerful woman, ensuring the caravan routes ran on time. You felt no anger, no desire for revenge. You felt only a vast, quiet distance. Their world of power and intrigue seemed like a story you had once heard about foolish, frantic people. You had witnessed the defeat of a great king and the bloody birth of a new empire. That event, which had threatened to destroy you, had instead forged you into something new. Your pessimism, your sharp-edged wit. They had been the brittle defenses of a man who knew his world was a lie, but didn't know how to live outside of it. The desert had burned all that away. It had taught you that life, stripped to its essence, was not about power or wealth or status. It was about a mouthful of water. It was about a secure knot. It was about a strong stitch holding a family's shelter together. It was about facing a new dawn, not with a cynical joke, but with a clear-eyed assessment of the day's work. You looked at your hands. They were darker now, the skin tougher. The needle calluses were still there, but they were broader, deeper, surrounded by new marks from working with leather and rough canvas. They were the hands of a man who built things that mattered. The defeat of Artabanus IV had taught you a final, profound lesson. An empire, a king, a tent of gold, they were just grand, fragile illusions. Real strength wasn't in the gold thread, but in the thread that mended a net. Real power wasn't in a crown, but in the skill of a hand and the resilience of a heart. You had returned to a reality far harsher than the one you had left, but infinitely more true. Here, in this small pocket of life surrounded by an ocean of sand, you were not just a tailor stitching illusions for the powerful. You were a czar, the mender, and you had finally stitched a life for yourself. The setting sun bled across the horizon, and you drew a final sturdy stitch through a leather sandal strap, knotting it with a practiced twist of your wrist. You held it up. The repair was clean, strong, functional. It was good work. You set it beside you on the woven mat outside your small home, the day's mending done. A quiet satisfaction settled in your chest, a feeling as steady and reliable as the cool evening breeze that whispered through the palm fronds overhead. This was your life now, a life measured in the setting of the sun, the drawing of water from the well, the needs of the community you served. The whispers you had once strained to hear in the marketplaces of Ctesiphon, the frantic, fearful murmurings about kings and rebellions, had been replaced by the gentle rustle of the palms, the bleating of goats settling for the night, and the low hum of Farnes's voice from inside your home. The world had ended, and in its place, you had found peace. You leaned back against the cool mud brick wall, your gaze drifting north, though there was nothing to see but a sea of dunes bathed in twilight. Your mind, unbidden, walked the long road back. It revisited the tailor's stall, a small, shaded island in a chaotic river of commerce. You remembered the feel of peacock blue silk under your fingers, the glint of gold thread, the weight of the pessimism that had been your constant companion. It had been a shield, you realized now, against the profound emptiness of your work. You had stitched illusions of power for men you despised, creating beauty that served no purpose other than to decorate a world you knew was hollow. Your cynicism was the only honest thing in your life. Then came the storm. The cloaked man, the lapis blue canvas, the tent of gold shimmering with a power that was already a ghost. You saw Nargis's face, etched with a grief so fierce it had been weaponized. You had judged her as a hard, cruel woman, an antagonist in your small story of survival. But she wasn't. She was just another soul broken by the same hollow world, trying to stitch it back together with fire and steel where you had used silk and thread. Both of you were trying to mend things, just on a vastly different scale. Her path was one of burning down the old world to make way for the new. Yours had been to simply walk away from it until you found a place where mending things still mattered. And the desert. The great, terrible crucible. It had burned away everything that was not essential. It took your pride, your fear, your flimsy city dweller's body. It took your certainty that the world was an evil place you could only endure. The desert didn't care for your opinions. It demanded only one thing, that you keep walking. It taught you that hardship wasn't a punishment to be resented, but a teacher, its lessons brutal but pure. You learned that a strong knot was more valuable than a pouch of gold, and a mouthful of clean water was a treasure beyond any king's ransom. The memory of it all wasn't traumatic anymore. It was foundational. It was the bedrock on which this new life was built. You had walked into that wasteland, a pessimistic tailor, a man whose sharp wit was just another tool to keep the world at arm's length. You had walked out a mender, a man whose hands were a part of a community, whose skill was woven into the fabric of its survival. You had found meaning not by overcoming the great powers of the world, but by discovering the small, essential power within yourself. The door to your home opened, and Farnaces stepped out, ducking his large frame under the low lintel. He held 2 clay cups, from which a fragrant steam rose. He handed one to you. It was a hot, sweet tea brewed from dried desert herbs. He settled his large frame on the mat beside you, sipping the tea with a quiet contentment. He was a different man from the terrified sailor who had collapsed on the riverbank. The desert had stripped him down too, but it had revealed a core of steady strength he never knew he possessed. The dependence was gone, replaced by a calm self-reliance. "You get that look sometimes," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Like you're 1,000 miles away." You took a sip of the hot tea, its warmth spreading through your chest. "I was just visiting an old life," you said. "Ctesiphon," he said. It wasn't a question. He stared out at the darkening dunes. "Do you ever miss it? The noise? The food? The river?" Quote, "You considered it honestly. I miss the thought of it," you admitted. "I miss our mother's stew. I miss the smell of rain on the city stones." But the life? The constant nagging fear that it could all be taken away? The feeling that you were a leaf in a storm, just waiting to be torn from the branch? "No, I don't miss that." Farnaces nodded slowly, understanding. "I used to think hope was a place," he mused, swirling the tea in his cup. "I hoped the winds would be fair. I hoped the portmaster would give me a good price. I hoped the king would keep the empire safe. It was always out there, something to be wished for. When we were in the desert, after the water was gone, I had no hope left. I thought that was the end." Quote, "I know," you said softly. "I was there with you." "But you kept going," he said, turning to look at you, his eyes clear and direct in the twilight. "You didn't have hope, Azar. You had something else, something harder. What was it?" Quote, you thought for a moment, trying to find the right word, the right stitch to close the thought. "Purpose," you finally said. "Hope is a desire for a better future. Purpose is the work you do today to build it. In the city, I had no purpose beyond earning coin. My only hope was to be left alone. It was a thin, fragile thing. The desert took it away, and I was glad to be rid of it." Quote, you looked at your hands, then at his. "When we were out there, our purpose was simple. Take the next step. Find the next drop of water. Survive until the next sunrise. And when we found this place, the purpose changed. It became, fix the well rope, mend the sandal, strengthen the awning." It wasn't about hoping the oasis would survive. It was about doing the work to make sure it did. "Perseverance," Farnaces breathed, the word tasting new in his mouth. "It's not just about enduring. It's about doing." "Exactly," you affirmed. "It's the stitch, and the one after that, and the one after that. You don't think about the finished robe. You think only of the needle in your hand. And one day you look up, and the work is done." They sat in a comfortable silence, the stars beginning to prick the deep violet sky. The vast, silent desert that had almost been your tomb was now the wall that protected your sanctuary. It kept the complicated, noisy world of men and their ambitions at bay. Do you think they are happy? Pharnaces asked quietly. Ardashir, the new king? Nargis, the tent maker? They got what they wanted. They defeated their enemies. They remade the world. You followed his gaze to the stars, the same stars that had guided you here. I think they have a new set of whispers to listen to, you said. Whispers about who is loyal and who is a threat. Whispers about new taxes and new rebellions. They traded one tent of gold for another, and they will spend the rest of their lives guarding its ropes, terrified a strong wind will come. Happiness doesn't live in a place like that. You took the last sip of your tea and set the cup down. The night was fully upon you now, cool and vast and peaceful. The whispers had ended. Not because the world had changed, but because you had. You were no longer listening for them. You were listening for the sound of the wind, the call of a night bird, the quiet breathing of the man beside you, your cousin, your brother in survival. It is a good life, Azar, Pharnaces said, his voice filled with a simple, profound gratitude. You looked at the small, sturdy home you had built together, at the community sleeping peacefully around you, at the infinite, silent witness of the desert. You had lost everything you thought was important, and in its place, you had found everything that truly was. Yes, cousin, you replied, and the words were the purest truth you had ever spoken. It is. The peace of the oasis became your new silk, a fabric woven not of a single fine thread, but of 1,000 sturdy interlocking ones, the pre-dawn chill giving way to the first warmth of the sun, the taste of fresh goat's milk, the shared laughter of children playing by the well. 3 years passed, each one turning like a page in a book you were learning to read. The terror of your flight from Ctesiphon faded, not into nothingness but into a scar, a reminder of the fire that had forged you. You had become the mender in truth. Your days were a quiet rhythm of repair. You did not just stitch tunics and tents. You became a student of how things fell apart, and an artist of how they could be held together. You learned to weave palm fronds into durable baskets, to mix mud and straw into bricks that would not crack under the sun, to read the health of a goat by the sheen of its coat. Your wit, once a sharp defense against the absurdity of the court, had softened into a gentle, observant wisdom. The villagers, who had first regarded you with suspicion, now sought your counsel. They would bring you a broken tool or a sick animal, and you would look at it with the same focused intensity you once reserved for a flawed seam, seeing not just the break, but the stress that had caused it. Pharnaces, too, had been remade by the desert's kiln. The boyish dependence had been baked out of him, leaving a man of quiet, formidable competence. He was the builder. He understood the language of stone and wood, the physics of weight and balance. When a family needed a new room added to their home, it was Pharnaces who showed them how to lay the foundation. When a camel threw a shoe, it was Pharnaces, with his immense strength and newfound gentleness, who could calm the beast and hold its foot steady. He taught the young boys of the oasis his sailor's knots, and soon the very structure of the village was held together by his teaching, from the roofs of the dwellings to the harnesses of the animals. He no longer looked to you for direction. He stood beside you, an equal partner in the life you had built. But the desert, your harsh sanctuary, was a fickle guardian. The 4th summer was hotter than the last, the sun a white-hot coin in a bleached sky. The well, the very heart of the oasis, began to show its age. The water level dropped. The seep that fed it slowed to a grudging trickle. What had once been a clear, generous pool became a shallow, murky basin. A quiet fear, more corrosive than any political whisper, began to spread through the community. The elder led prayers at the water's edge, the people's faces etched with a familiar fatalistic worry. You watched them, your pragmatist's mind cold and clear. Prayer was a balm for the spirit, but it would not fill the well. You spent a full day simply observing, a tailor studying a fraying garment. You watched the women draw water, bucket by bucket, a slow, arduous process. You watched them carry the heavy skins to the date groves, pouring water at the base of each palm. You saw how much was lost along the way, spilled on the hot sand, stolen by the thirsty air. The system was based on tradition and faith, and it was failing. It was the tent of gold all over again, a beautiful, familiar structure on the verge of collapse. That evening you took a stick and drew in the sand outside your home. You did not draw a flower or a cymurg. You drew a pattern of lines, radiating from a central point. A web. Pharnaces came and stood over you, his shadow long in the setting sun. "What is it?" he asked, his voice low. "It's a robe for the oasis," you said, looking up at him. "One that fits, one that won't tear." You explained your idea, not with the frantic desperation of your flight, but with the calm logic of a craftsman. The problem wasn't just the amount of water, it was how they used it. They needed to mend their relationship with the well. You proposed a system of narrow, clay-lined channels, a miniature aqueduct that would carry the water directly from the well to the base of the palms, a sealed system that would give nothing to the sun or the sand. You sketched a new design for the wellhead, a counterweighted lever system, based on principles you had seen on the docks of the Tigris, that would make drawing the water twice as fast with half the effort. Farnaces stared at the drawing in the sand, his builder's mind immediately grasping the mechanics. He nodded slowly. The lever, it would work, like a ship's crane. And the channels, less work, less waste. He looked at you, a slow smile spreading across his face. "A mender. You want to mend the very earth, Azar." Quote. The next day you presented your plan to the elder. You stood before the community, the crude drawing in the sand your only scroll. The elder listened patiently, his face unreadable. The other villagers murmured amongst themselves, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and fear. "The well is a gift," one man said, his voice heavy with tradition. "We take what it offers. We do not chain it in channels of mud like a beast." "This is not the way of our fathers," an old woman added, shaking her head. "It is new, it is dangerous." The fear of change was a wall, as real as any you had faced in the desert. You saw your idea dying before it was born, killed by the same resistance to the unknown that had kept the Parthian court decadent and blind. You opened your mouth to argue, to use your wit to persuade them, but before you could speak, Farnaces stepped forward. He did not address you. He spoke to the people, his voice calm and steady, a low anchor in their sea of doubt. "I am a man of the sea," he began, and they all turned to listen, respecting the quiet authority he had earned. "On the sea, you respect tradition, but you do not worship it. If a new way of rigging a sail means you can survive a storm that would have killed your father, you use it. You honor your father's memory by living, not by dying the same way he did." He knelt and pointed a thick finger at your drawing. "This lever is a good design. The weight of the bucket going down helps pull the full one up. It is smart. The channels think of them not as chains, but as careful hands, carrying the water to where it is needed most, spilling none. It is a work of respect for the water, not of mastery over it." He looked from the drawing to the elder. "Azar's hands are clever. My back is strong. Let us try. We will build it for one row of palms. If it fails, we have lost nothing but a little sweat. If it works, we have given a gift to our children." Quote. His words, simple and practical, resonated in a way your more complex arguments never could have. He was one of them now, a man of calloused hands, and they trusted his judgment. The elder looked from Farnaces' earnest face to your determined one. He saw not reckless youth, but a partnership of mind and body, of thought and action. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "One row," he commanded. "Let us see this new mending." Quote, the work began. It transformed the oasis. Under your direction, the children and women dug the shallow trenches according to the pattern you had laid out. Farnaces led the men, teaching them how to mix the clay to the right consistency to line the channels, how to build the wooden frame for the new wellhead. It was hard, grueling labor under the hot sun, but it was work with a clear, shared purpose. You were not just building an irrigation system. You were rebuilding the community's faith in its own ability to solve its problems. You moved among them, your eye for detail catching a poorly mixed batch of clay or a channel dug at the wrong angle, correcting it with a quiet word and a guiding hand. Farnaces was magnificent. He was a general commanding an army of builders, his voice booming with encouragement, his hands demonstrating every task. He single-handedly raised the heavy main beam of the new wellhead into place, a feat of strength that drew gasps from the onlookers. You saw him, his body gleaming with sweat, his face alight with concentration and joy, and you felt a surge of pride so fierce it almost brought tears to your eyes. This was the man he was always meant to be. After a week of labor, it was done. The new lever stood over the well, a strange, beautiful sculpture of wood and rope. A network of narrow, glistening clay channels snaked from its base to the first row of palms. A hush fell over the entire village as the elder stepped forward to test it. He pulled the lever. The empty bucket descended smoothly, and with an ease that seemed magical, the full one rose, brimming with water. He tipped it into the main basin, and the water began to flow, a silver serpent gliding down the channel, reaching the base of the first palm with not a drop wasted. A collective sigh of wonder went through the crowd, followed by a cheer. The project was a success. In the months that followed, the single row of palms became greener and more fruitful than the others, their dates larger and sweeter. The oasis was saved, not by a miracle, but by craft and courage. One afternoon, a year later, a small, dusty caravan arrived from the south, the first you had seen in a long time. The merchant, a wiry man with shrewd eyes, brought news from the world you had left behind. Ardashir's Sasanian Empire was strong, he said, but constantly at war. Taxes were high to fund the armies, and the roads, though safer from bandits, were thick with soldiers and spies. It was the same old story, stitched in a new color. The merchant saw the well system, saw the health of the palms, and was impressed. He sought out Pharnaces, having heard he was the builder. "I am outfitting a new trade fleet on the Gulf," he said, his voice slick with opportunity. "For the India route. I need a master rigger, a man who knows wood and rope. The pay is a fortune." "Man of your skill! You would be a king on my ships." Pharnaces listened patiently, his arms crossed over his broad chest. You watched from a distance, your heart suddenly tight. This was the test. A path back to his old life, offered on a platter of silver. Your cousin smiled, a slow, easy smile. "I thank you for the offer," he said, his voice rumbling with a calm certainty that left no room for negotiation. "But my work is here." He gestured to the oasis, to the children playing in the shade of the awning he had secured, to the sturdy homes he had helped raise. "I am already a king on this ship." The merchant, after a moment of surprise, simply nodded and moved on, seeking other trades. Pharnaces caught your eye and gave you a small, knowing wink. You walked over to him as the caravan prepared to leave. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the oasis, making the water in the channels glow. You had never felt more at home. You didn't even consider it, you said, a statement, not a question. "There was nothing to consider," he replied, looking out at the thriving groves. "That man was offering me a job. This place, this is my life." You stood beside him, watching the caravan shrink into the vastness of the desert. You had once believed that your journey was an escape, a flight from a world that had tried to crush you, but looking at the flourishing oasis, at the strong, independent man your cousin had become, at the deep satisfaction of your own purposeful work, you finally understood the lesson you had been stitching together all along. You hadn't escaped the world. You had simply left the grand, crumbling palace of others to build a small, sturdy home of your own. Your journey had not ended in the desert, it had begun there. And the life you were rebuilding, one day, one stitch, one act of creation at a time, was a garment that would last forever. The quiet years settled over the oasis like fine, protective dust. They smoothed the sharp edges of memory and nurtured the deep roots of a new life. The well, with its clever system of levers and channels, became the oasis's undisputed heart, its lifeblood flowing in steady, predictable rhythms. The date palms, once thirsty and struggling, now stood lush and heavy with fruit. The community, bound together by the shared triumph of its own salvation, was prosperous and content. You and Pharnaces were no longer the outsiders, the refugees. You were Azar the Mender and Pharnaces the Builder, your names spoken with the same casual respect as the elders. Your past was a story you no longer told, a garment packed away in a chest, its colors faded, its purpose served. Then, after 7 years of this gentle peace, the outside world sent another messenger. A caravan, larger than any you had seen before, lumbered into view, its camels laden with goods from the far north, amber from the cold seas, fine wool from the mountain tribes. It was led by an old merchant, a man whose face was a map of the 1,000 trade routes he had traveled. He was heading south, to the ports of the Gulf, and his caravan was a river of news, flowing from one end of the Sasanian Empire to the other. That evening, as the travelers rested, you sat with the old merchant, sharing a small bowl of dates. He was a storyteller, his voice a dry rustle of parchment, and he spoke of the state of the world. He talked of Ardashir's endless wars on the Roman frontier, of the heavy taxes levied to pay for them, of the grand new cities being built to glorify the King of Kings. It was, as you had always suspected, the same tale of power and ambition, simply told in a different language. You listened politely, your mind only half engaged. This world of kings and armies was no longer yours. But then the merchant, swirling the dregs of his tea, spoke a name that jolted you from your peaceful remove. Most curious story, though, he mused, is the one they tell in the capital about the tent maker. Nargis, they called her. You felt a chill, as if a shadow from a long-forgotten cloud had passed over the sun. You kept your face placid, your hands still. I am a mender of tents, you said, your voice even. I know of the great artisans. What is the story? The merchant leaned in, his eyes gleaming with the pleasure of a well-told tale. Ah, then you would appreciate this. They say she was one of Ardashir's first and most fervent supporters. A true believer. Her knowledge of the land, of the caravan routes, it was the loom on which he wove his victory. For a time she was powerful. She was put in charge of all the imperial caravans, tasked with supplying the legions. She demanded efficiency. She demanded honesty. She made the roads safer, and the supplies cheaper than they had ever been. Quote. He paused, taking a date and chewing it slowly. And that was her mistake. The new court, you see, is much like the old court. It is filled with the king's friends, with grasping nobles and sly administrators who see their positions not as a duty, but as an opportunity to fill their purses. Nargis's efficiency meant less opportunity for them to skim from the top. Her honesty was a bright lamp in a room full of men who preferred the shadows. She made them look corrupt and lazy. And powerful men do not like to be made to look bad. Quote, you felt a knot tighten in your stomach, a grim, familiar dread. She complained, the merchant continued, his voice dropping. She went to the King of Kings himself. She spoke of corruption, of how the new order was betraying its promises, how it was becoming just as rotten as the Parthian court she helped destroy. She thought her loyalty, her service, had earned her the right to speak the truth. Quote, he let out a short, cynical puff of air. She learned, as many do, that the most dangerous thing you can be to a new king is a reminder of the ideals he proclaimed before he had power. One day, there was an incident. A ledger showing massive discrepancies in grain shipments went missing from her office. The next day, She-Dux is accused of the theft, of treason, of plotting to starve a legion on the border to aid the Romans. Quote, the lie was so audacious, so perfectly constructed, you could almost admire its craftsmanship. There was no trial, the merchant finished, his voice a near whisper. There never is for such things. She was a loose thread in their new tapestry. They say she was taken to the same Zagros Pass where her father's caravan was once destroyed. They gave her a single waterskin and pointed her east, into the salt flats. They say the new Minister of Trade, the very man she had accused of corruption, remarked that he was merely granting her the solitude she seemed to crave. Single quote, quote. The story ended. The merchant, having unburdened himself of his best tale, soon bid you good night and retired to his tent. You remained seated, the uneaten dates in the bowl before you, the desert nights suddenly cold. Nargis, dead, cast out into the wilderness, just as she had helped cast you out. The irony was so bitter, so precise, it was like one of your own cynical jokes brought to terrible life. You felt no triumph, no sense of justice served. You felt only a profound and hollow ache. You saw her face in her workshop, her eyes burning with a righteous fury born of unimaginable grief. I want a world where that cannot happen again, asterisk, she had said. And in her quest to build it, she had become another brick in its foundation, crushed under the weight of the very thing she was creating. She had fought the storm and become the lightning rod. You stood and walked away from the camp, out into the dunes, needing to be alone with the ghost that had just risen from the past. You found a place where the starlight was unobscured by the palm trees and sat, drawing your knees to your chest. You finally understood her, not just her pain, but her folly. Her belief that you could fight a fire by becoming a fiercer fire. She had thought power was a tool she could wield to mend the world. But power is not a tool. It is a current. It flows through you, and if you are not careful, it carries you away, leaving you stranded on a distant, desolate shore. She had wanted to create order, but the order she helped build had no room for her own fierce, uncompromising spirit. She was too sharp, too true. She was a well-made blade in a court of soft men who preferred the bludgeon and the poisoned cup. You looked up at the vast, silent tapestry of the stars, the same stars that had guided you and Farnaces on your desperate journey. You had survived because you had let go. You had abandoned the fight, renounced the world of men and their grand, bloody games. You had chosen a small life, a life of mending, of building, of quiet purpose. Nargis had held on. She had gripped her righteous anger like a sword, and in the end, the new masters had simply taken the sword and run her through with it. Your anger at her, the fear she had instilled in you, the memory of her cold dismissal, it all dissolved like salt in water. All that was left was a deep, aching pity for the woman who found her husband staked out under the sun and spent the rest of her life trying to burn down the sky. Her great, world-changing project had failed, and she had died for it. Your small, life-saving project had succeeded, and you were alive to watch the stars. A heavy hand came to rest on your shoulder. Farnaces settled beside you in the sand, his presence a warm, solid comfort. He did not ask what was wrong. He had heard the merchant's story too. "She got lost," he said after a long silence, his voice a low rumble, like a sailor who trusts a faulty star chart. She thought it was leading her to a safe harbor, but it led her onto the rocks. Quote, "She drew the chart herself, Farnaces," you said quietly. "That's the tragedy. She believed in it." "Belief can be a dangerous thing," he agreed, nodding. "It can make you blind to the reef right in front of you." He picked up a handful of sand, letting it sift through his thick fingers. "This place, the desert, it doesn't care what you believe. It only cares what you do. Do you find water? Do you build shelter? Do you help the man next to you? The rest is just noise." You looked at your cousin, at the simple, hard-won wisdom in his face. He was right. You had reconciled with your past, not by forgetting it, but by building a present so solid, so real, that the ghosts of what was no longer had the power to haunt you. The weight of the past was still there, but you were stronger now. You could carry it. It was no longer a burden. It was a part of the story, a dark thread that made the brighter one shine all the more. You reached into the small pouch at your belt where you kept your tools. You took out your needle and a length of thread, not to mend anything, just to hold them. They were the instruments of your salvation, the symbols of your new life. Nargis had tried to reweave the entire tapestry of the empire. You had learned. It was enough to mend the small tear in front of you. "I am sorry she is dead," you said, the words feeling true and clean in your mouth. "I am too," Farnaces said. "No one deserves to die of thirst." He paused. "But I am glad we are alive." Quote, you looked at the oasis, a small island of deep green and warm, flickering lights in the vast, silent darkness of the desert. You saw the shapes of the homes you had helped build, the groves you had helped save. You heard the distant, gentle sound of the well lever creaking as someone drew water for the night. This was not the world you had been born into. It was the world you had made. The weight of your past had been the stone you used to grind the grain for the bread of your future. It was heavy, yes, but it was also useful. It was yours. "Let's go home, cousin," you said, rising to your feet and brushing the sand from your clothes. And for the first time since hearing the news, you smiled. You were already there. As you walked back towards the warm, flickering lights of the oasis, the silence between you and Farnaces was not empty. It was filled with the weight of the story you had just heard, a final, grim postscript to the life you had fled. The ghost of Nargis, a woman of iron will and tragic conviction, seemed to walk beside you for a moment before dissolving into the vast, indifferent sands that had ultimately claimed her. You had long since made peace with your past, but her fate served as a stark and final lesson, a closing stitch on the tapestry of your understanding. "She built her house on a fault line," Farnaces said, his voice a low rumble that did not disturb the quiet of the night. "She thought if she made the house strong enough, the ground would stop shaking." Quote, you nodded, the analogy feeling profoundly true, and we ran from the earthquake until we found solid ground. You stopped for a moment, looking at the small cluster of mud brick homes that was your entire world. It wasn't grand. It had no gilded tents or mosaic floors, but it was solid. Its foundations went deep into the bedrock of shared survival. This, you realized, was the final lesson the desert had taught you, the one that had been unfolding slowly over 7 quiet years. It was the lesson of resilience. Back in Ctesiphon, you had mistaken pessimism for resilience. You believed that by expecting the worst, you were armored against it. You thought your cynical wit was a shield, but it was a brittle shield made of glass. It might deflect a small stone, but against a true blow, it would shatter, and it had. True resilience, you had learned, was not the unyielding hardness of stone, which can be broken. It was the supple strength of leather, which gives under pressure and can be mended when it tears. You had spent your life mending things for others, yet you had never understood the philosophy of the act itself. To mend is to acknowledge imperfection, to accept that things break, that entropy is the law of the universe. Resilience wasn't the avoidance of hardship, it was the practice of repair. It was the patient work of taking what was broken and making it whole again, stitch by patient stitch. You had fled the fall of an empire, and in doing so, you had learned that the only kingdom worth building is the one you can repair with your own 2 hands. As you entered the circle of the oasis, the sounds of life enveloped you. A mother softly singing a lullaby to her child. 2 old men quietly debating the health of a camel. The aroma of baking bread from a communal oven. This small, vibrant ecosystem of souls was the living embodiment of resilience. Their strength was not in their individual fortitude, though they were all tough, hardy people. Their true strength, their ability to withstand the harshness of the desert year after year, was in their interconnectedness. They were a woven fabric. A single thread might snap, but the cloth would hold. This was the lesson Nargis had never learned. She saw the world as a collection of individuals, of the strong and the weak, the corrupt and the righteous. She had tried to remake the world alone, through sheer force of will, believing her strength was enough. But a single thread, no matter how strong, cannot make a tent. It takes 1,000 threads, woven together, supporting each other, to create shelter from the storm. Her story was the ultimate tragedy of individualism. She had stood alone against the corruption of the new court, and they had simply cut her thread and let her fall. There was no one to catch her, no weave to hold her in place, because she had never believed in the weave, only in the strength of her own fiber. You looked at Pharnaces, his large, comforting presence beside you. He was your first and most important thread in this new life. Your shared struggle was the loom on which your partnership had been woven. In Ctesiphon, he had been dependent on you, a ship looking for an anchor. You, in turn, had seen him as a responsibility, a burden of affection. Your relationship was a simple, linear chain, but the desert had broken that chain and forced you to reweave it into something far stronger. "Do you remember the 3rd day in the desert?" you asked, your voice soft. "When you dropped the water skin." Quote, Pharnaces grunted, the memory still raw. "I was ready to die. I told you to leave me." Quote, "And I almost did," you confessed, the admission tasting strange after all these years. The old me, the tailor from the city, would have. He would have made a sad joke about it, and walked on alone until he fell to. He believed that in the end, every man dies alone. "What stopped you?" "You did," you said simply. "I looked at you, and I didn't just see my cousin. I saw the other half of my own survival. I had the will, you had the strength. Alone, we were just 2 dying men. Together, we were a chance." It was the first time in my life I realized that resilience wasn't something you held inside yourself. It's something you build between people. Pharnaces was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. "When the well was failing," he said finally, "and you showed us the drawing in the sand, I saw the fear in everyone's eyes, the fear of something new. They were ready to just let it happen, to pray and hope. But I spoke up for you, because I remembered the desert. I remembered that your strange ideas, the ones that sounded like madness, were the ones that kept us alive. You trusted my strength when I had none left. So I trusted your mind when they were all afraid to." Quote, you both stopped in the center of the oasis, by the side of the life-giving well. The new lever system, Pharnaces' handiwork, stood silhouetted against the starry sky, a monument to your partnership. You had survived. And then you had taught this entire community how to survive, not by being stronger, but by being stronger together. The shared struggle of your flight had been a microcosm for the shared struggle of the oasis against the desert. The lesson was the same. Connection is resilience. Community is strength. A small child, a girl of about 5 with eyes as bright as polished stones, ran up to you. She was holding a small cloth doll, one of its arms hanging by a single thread. She looked up at you, her face a mask of solemn worry. She didn't say a word. She just held out the doll. You smiled, kneeling down to her level. "Ah, a terrible injury," you said, your voice gentle. "But I think we can save her." Quote, you sat on the edge of the well's basin, the cool stone, a familiar comfort. You took out your needle and thread from the pouch at your belt. The girl sat beside you, watching with rapt attention as your fingers, so sure and practiced, went to work. Farnesses stood nearby, a silent, smiling guardian. This was your life now, summed up in this single, perfect moment. You were not stitching illusions for kings. You were mending the beloved toy of a small child. The act was small, but the meaning was immeasurable. Your past was not a ghost that haunted you. It was a teacher whose lessons you had finally mastered. Hardship, you had learned, was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of resilience. And resilience was not a solitary virtue, but a communal one. It was the hand that reached for yours in the darkness. It was the shared cup of water. It was the faith you placed in each other when your own faith had run dry. It was the quiet, constant work of mending the tears in the fabric of your world, together. You snipped the final thread, knotting it securely. You handed the doll back to the little girl. Its arm was whole again, the stitches neat and almost invisible, a tiny scar marking where it had been broken and then made strong again. She beamed, clutching the doll to her chest, and then, with the unthinking grace of childhood, she threw her arms around your neck in a fierce hug. As you held her, you looked up at Farnesses, and the look that passed between you needed no words. You were home, not in a place, but in a purpose. The defeat of Artabanus IV had sent you into the wilderness to die, but instead you had learned how to truly live. You had learned that the grandest empires are as fragile as a single thread, but the smallest act of kindness, the simplest gesture of community, can build a sanctuary strong enough to last a lifetime. The little girl's hug was a warm, living anchor, mooring you to the present moment more securely than any rope or stitch ever could. You felt the slight weight of her, the absolute trust in her embrace, and understood that this small gesture held more value than all the silver in Ctesiphon. When she pulled away, her smile was at dawn, and she ran off, the mended doll held triumphantly aloft, a tiny banner of renewal. You watched her go, a quiet joy settling in your heart, as soft and sturdy as a well-spun thread. The years that followed were like the slow, deliberate work of a master weaver, each season adding a new line of color and texture to the life of the oasis. The harsh, brilliant threads of your first years, the stark white of the sun, the deep black of your fear, were gradually woven over with the gentler hues of community. The soft green of thriving date groves, the warm ochre of new homes, the deep blue of the evening sky shared in peace. Your legacy, and that of Farnesses, was not something you planned or proclaimed. It grew organically, like the palms you had saved. You, Azar the Mender, found you were no longer just repairing objects. You were repairing spirits. The children of the oasis, who had once watched you with shy curiosity, now gathered at your feet in the cool of the afternoon. You did not give them formal lessons. You simply worked, and you let them watch. You would take a torn grain sack and show them not just how to close the hole, but how to see the pattern of the weave, to understand where the stress lay, and to reinforce it so it would not tear again. A patch is not a failure, you told a young boy named Cave, whose frustration with his clumsy first stitches was plain on his face. It is a story. It tells you where the weakness was. It is a lesson. A well-made patch makes the cloth stronger than it was before. Do not hide your mending. Make it a mark of pride. You taught them the philosophy of the needle, patience, foresight, and the profound truth that there is more honor in preserving what is useful than in discarding it for something new. Soon, the children took a quiet pride in their own repairs. A neatly patched tunic or a carefully rebound sandal became a small badge of honor, a sign of their growing skill and their contribution to the whole. Farnesses, in turn, became the village's engineer. His early fear of the desert had been replaced by a deep and intuitive understanding of its demands. He taught the young men not just how to build, but how to see. He showed them how the sun traveled across the sky and how to angle a roof to provide the most shade. He demonstrated how a wall, if built with a slight curve, could better withstand the force of the wind. His legacy was written in the cool interiors of the homes, in the sturdiness of the animal pens, in the clever counterweighted gates that kept the herds safe at night. Your partnership remained the heart of it all. You would sit together in the evenings, sketching new ideas in the sand. Your intricate knowledge of patterns and stress points combined with his grasp of physics and solid form. Together, you designed a more efficient press for extracting oil from dates, and a system of shaded racks for drying fruit that kept it safe from birds and insects. The oasis didn't just survive, it flourished. It became a small, self-sufficient jewel of ingenuity in the vast emptiness. One afternoon, many years after your arrival, you sat in your accustomed spot by the well, your own hair now more silver than black, your movements slower but no less precise. You were watching a young woman, perhaps 18 years old, supervising the annual reinforcement of the communal awning. It was the little girl to whom you had given the doll, all those years ago. Her name was Anahita, and she had become your most gifted student. She moved with a quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the canvas, her hands sure as she directed the others. You saw her pause, looking at a section near the main pull. She consulted with no one. She simply retrieved her own mending kit, threaded a needle with dark blue thread, a color she had painstakingly created from desert berries, and began to work. She was not just patching a weak spot. She was adding a small, decorative pattern around it, a cluster of 7 embroidered stars. It was beautiful, but it was more than that. The pattern's stitches added a second layer of strength to the canvas, distributing the load. It was a perfect fusion of function and grace. It was your philosophy, taken and made into her own. Pharnaces came and sat beside you, his own beard now a magnificent cascade of white. He followed your gaze. "She has a good eye," he rumbled, a deep pride in his voice. "Almost as good as her teachers." "Better," you said softly. "She added stars." Quote, in that moment, you understood what a legacy truly was. It was not a monument you built to yourself. It was a seed you planted in the garden of another. It was the skill, the wisdom, the small spark of beauty that you passed on, which then grew into something new, something you could never have imagined. It was Anahita, adding stars to the sky of your teaching. Your story was no longer just your own. It was woven into the life of this place, into the hands and hearts of its people. It would live on long after your own thread was snipped. You lived to be a very old man, old enough to see Kaveh, the boy who despaired over his first stitches, become the community's finest leather worker. Old enough to see Anahita teach her own daughter how to hold a needle. Old enough to see the grandchildren of the people who first greeted you with suspicion run to you with their broken toys and scraped knees, knowing you were the one who could make things whole. On your last evening, you sat with Pharnaces outside your home, watching the sun bleed its final colors across the endless dunes. Your breathing was shallow, your body frail, but your mind was as clear as the oasis pool. You had lived a life of two halves. The first, in the frantic, fearful world of men. The second, in this quiet cradle of purpose. You knew, with a certainty that calmed your very soul, which half had been the real one. "It was a good life," Pharnax whispered, his hand finding yours, his grip still strong. You smiled, your eyes closing. "We made it so," you replied. And as you drifted away, it was not into a fearful darkness, but into a gentle quiet, like sinking into the cool, deep waters of the well. The story of Azar the tailor was over. The legacy of Azar the mender had just begun. Now take a slow, deep breath. Let the air fill you, and as you exhale, let the noise of your day fade away with it. Let the story of Azar settle around you, a soft blanket of peace. His journey began in a world of silk and steel, a world of grand ambitions and crashing empires, much like our own world can sometimes feel. He was caught in a storm, stripped of everything, and left in a wasteland. But it was there, in the quiet desolation, that he found the things that truly matter. The feel of cool water on a parched tongue, the strength of a hand that helps you to your feet, the quiet satisfaction of making something broken whole again. The greatest empires turn to dust. The grandest tents of gold eventually fall to ruin. But the skills we share, the communities we build, the kindness we offer, these are the things that endure. They are the threads that weave a legacy of resilience, not in stone monuments, but in the living hearts of those we touch. Our lives are not so different from Azar's. We all face our own deserts, our own hardships. We all have things in our lives that are torn, things that need mending. If these journeys into the past bring you a little peace, if they offer you a quiet space to reflect, a gentle tap on the like button is always deeply appreciated. It lets me know you're listening, and a subscription ensures you'll never miss our travels together. I'd love to read where you're listening from tonight. What small thing in your life you might be mending. It's a joy to know this small community of listeners is out there, under the same stars. For now, though, the work is done. Let the lessons of the oasis soothe you. Remember that even in the harshest wilderness, a life of purpose can bloom. And the most powerful legacy you can leave is the simple, profound act of making your small corner of the world a little stronger, a little kinder than you found it. Let the silence of the desert night settle around you now. Feel the peace of the sleeping oasis. There are no more whispers of fear. There is only the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Rest. Rest now. Time sleep. Asterisk.